It's the State of the Union, you guys. Can we even really fake laugh at this point?
I'm just done.
I can fake yawn.
Welcome to Daily Wire Backstage, State of the Union special. Spoiler alert. It's not going to be very good. I'm Jeremy, the God King of the Daily Wire, lowercase g, lowercase k. Lesson the actual God King is watching. Also, spoiler alert, he's not. Let's get this thing started. Tonight, we're going to be with you for 3, yes, that is correct, 3 very long hours.
Why
I'm going to be honest.
tell me this?
It's going to be 3.5.
It's going to be 3.5.
Last year, Donald Trump went for 1 hour and 20 minutes, and that was considered a short State of the Union address. But we're going to try to make it go fast with our usual... We'll see if Michael Knowles is wearing his best Ralph Northam costume or just that hideous cigar jacket of his, which alone should disqualify him from public office. And yes, we will take questions from Daily Wire subscribers. And tonight, you can ask questions only if you are a subscriber over at dailywire.com. That's where you want to go. Hit the subscribe button and become one today. We will be very grateful, as our subscribers are basically who keeps us in whiskey and cigars. A tip for viewers while watching the president's speech tonight. As with every State of the Union, all the politicians on the right side of the screen, that's the Republicans, they will stand and clap continuously for an hour no matter what is said. And all the politicians on the left side of the screen, that's the Democrats, will be announcing their 2020 presidential campaigns. Contractually obligated to be with me tonight are Ben Shapiro, Andrew Klavan, Michael Knowles, and Alicia Krause. Hey, Alicia.
I'm here. How are you guys?
Oh,
Well,
we're just
Ready and raring to go.
Awesome, Alicia. Couldn't be happier.
Well, you do have a little old lady drink there. I think that you look like you're drinking something with an 80-year-old woman from the villages. Senia thinks that you're drinking something that a 14-year-old girl would drink behind the bleachers at her, spring formal.
I'm comfortable with that stuff, Alicia. You know what? I don't have to fake my masculinity. All this whiskey and cigars. All I can say is that this is delicious.
With the umbrella, you had to go all the way in the iridescent cup. But thank you, everyone, for watching. As Jeremy said, if you're a subscriber, you can go over to dailywire.com, log in, and type your questions for the guys into the chat box. All of the questions tonight are going to be about the State of the Union. So be sure to ask us those questions, and only subscribers get to ask them. But anyone watching can head over now, because live on Facebook, we're going to be putting up a poll later, and we want to know if you guys think it's necessary to have a State of the Union address. So let us know your thoughts, and the results are going to be read live on air a little later.
Thank you, Alicia. And hey, you guys know what today is?
Oh, my look at that.
Happy
Worst birthday ever.
Happy birthday to the God King.
Honestly, the only thing that makes tonight palatable is knowing that Jeremy has to suffer through this on his birthday.
It is brutal. How did you plan this? This is frankly the president getting revenge on you, I think.
Yes. The President of the United States himself was sitting around the Oval. He said, I'm going to call Nancy. Jeremy didn't vote for me for the president. I actually had to cancel reservations at a beautiful steakhouse.
Did you really?
With friends tonight to spend time, with you guys.
Well, that's...
This is the first bit of joy I felt all day.
And it's not just any birthday. It's like last birthday.
It's the birthday, I know.
Honest.
This is the birthday. This is the one where everything suddenly goes it's like that scene where everything speeds up in Goodfellas, because suddenly everything's going really fast.
This is the one right before your milestone birthday of 41?
Yeah.
No, your next birthday is 60, believe me. It's like, come on.
Well, before I die, let's make a little money, honey, to quote a great man, and talk about honey.
Well, these days it's impossible to agree on virtually anything. But we can all agree that we need to save money, which is why I use Honey and you should too. Honey is a free shopping tool that automatically searches the internet for the best promo codes every time you buy something online. They believe that everyone deserves the best prices possible on all the things you like, and that's why it works on all your favorite sites like Amazon or eBay, J.Crew, Walmart, Best Buy, all of them. In fact, Honey has already saved listeners of this podcast an average of $26.34. Every single time I buy something for myself or for my wife, I'm saving money when I use Honey. And again, all you have to do is you go and you register, and then it just runs kind of in the background of your computer.
Literally, Michael Knowles put this on my computer.
You don't even know it's
there. I did it before the Daily Wire existed.
It's the only thing Knowles has ever done.
It's the one productive thing I've done. I've saved thousands of dollars.
And not quite as much as his salary has cost us. But and that's why Honey is useful. It could be great for you. They have 10 million members, over 100,000 5-star reviews. Honey is the money-saving shopping tool everyone can agree on. And so right now, add Honey for free at joinhoney.com/backstage. That's joinhoney.com/backstage because you are watching the Daily Wire Backstage. Joinhoney.com/backstage. Honey is the smart shopping assistant that helps you save time and money, so go check them out at joinhoney.com.
Ben should have used Honey when he was setting my salary. He could have saved 40%, 50%.
Or I could have just hired a woman. Paid you 77 cents on the dollar. That would have solved everything. By the way, you see this breaking news that Elizabeth Warren actually registered as a Native American while she was registering for the State Bar of Texas?
I'm shocked.
This is remarkable.
It's the greatest thing in the world. Believe all women. Hashtag believe all women.
How long ago was this?
Well, I mean, she registered for the bar in the 80s, right?
In the 80s?
So
Yeah.
it's 30 years ago.
But we've all known this, right? She obviously used it to get into Harvard, and Harvard protects the record, so there's no evidence of it. So all this is the first time that we're seeing what we all basically knew to be true all along.
Yeah, I mean, she'd appeared in a couple of the journals suggesting that she was sort of the American Indian Harvard member. And then she said, all the people there said, no, we didn't admit her based on this. We admitted her based on other factors. Whatever it is, the fact that she lied about this and that she actually put it on an official form, she's toast. I mean, you can kiss Elizabeth Warren's chances.
Completely true.
Oh, yeah.
And
Good night.
but do we now have to listen to her tell that story again about her papa and her mama, whatever the hell it
And how
was?
they
And the
had
high
to-
cheekbones.
Yeah, how they had to run away because of their
The
forbidden
Indians,
love.
that's right.
She actually told the story of Pocahontas. That's right. And then it turns out that her prospective father-in-law was going to threaten her father with a club, and then her mother came in and threw her body over her father, and then everybody sang together, and then he went off on a ship. And
I think her presidential hopes are blown away by the color of the wind, I think.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know, I have the document pulled up right here. The whole story was that, this was a mistake from Harvard. She never had anything to do with it. But there it is, 1986, April 11th, 1986, in her own handwriting, American Indian, signature, Liz Warren, right there.
Pretty spectacular stuff.
beautiful.
Man. Well, I guess she's the second Democrat to blow herself up on the shoals of race this week.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, in Virginia, she I mean, is it possible she's the other person in that Ralph Northam photo?
Maybe
Who the hell knows? Everything is
maybe she becomes
insane.
governor after Justin Fairfax.
Exactly. Like, let's be real about this. Right now, the only person, like, the front runner has to be Kamala Harris in the Democratic Party.
yeah,
right?
no
I
question
mean,
about
clearly,
it. No
she's
question.
winning the intersectional war.
Yeah,
I mean, so much so that Bernie Sanders is being ripped up and down for having the temerity to even give a State of the Union response tonight because Stacey Abrams is giving the official response. So this is the third time he's given a non-democratic response to the State of the Union, and he's giving one again tonight, but Stacey Abrams is giving the official response. So it didn't matter when he did it when Joe Kennedy was doing it, but Stacey Abrams is a black woman. And that means that he is a racist because he is giving a non-official State of the Union response. There are people who are tweeting out that he was talking over her. He's talking after her. Like, she's talking, and then he said, she's a great pick, and also I'm going to give my own thoughts. Like, you can't give your thoughts. You got to stop with that thought giving. Cut it out, Bernie.
I just want to know, is he going to do it shirtless like the Soviet Union video? As long as he does it
that
shirtless
was great.
singing,
That was great.
then I'll watch it.
By the way, I don't know if collusion means what they think that it means when Bernie Sanders can go over to the actual Soviet Union
And sing American communist songs shirtless with the Ruskies.
with the Ruskies. It's amazing.
Kamala Harris is surprisingly bad so far, though, at what she does. I mean,
She doesn't have to be good. She just has to be mediocre and not
think so?
Trump. I mean,
Well-
right now, the polls are showing right now
Yeah.
that over 50% of Americans say they will definitely not vote for Trump.
Yeah, I've
now,
seen
that
that.
only matches up once he has an opponent, right? You can
Right.
say you're definitely not voting for someone, and then you vote for them if the other person stinks enough, or if you just decide not to show up to the polls because the
Yeah.
other person stinks. Trump basically has to shut up for about 2 years and let the Democrats be as crazy as they want to be.
Yeah.
And
They're certainly
Kamala
good at
Harris,
that, yeah.
she does have some very weird mannerisms in the sense that, like, she has the awkward laugh that Hillary used to do.
She has the exact
It-
laugh
it-
as
like the
Hillary.
exact same one. It's very weird.
She's
But-
also corrupt. I mean, there's something about, first of all, that Willie Brown story is a genuine
It's an
story.
amazing
it's a genuine story of sexual malfeasance and political corruption mixed together. Today she was interviewing that judge candidate.
She is awful.
It was awful what she did to her. You know, the woman had written
Rao,
a piece saying
yeah.
if you don't want to get raped at a party, don't get drunk is one way to do it. She was saying it was blaming the victim. It was just
I
absolutely.
mean, the entire article specifically
she-
says if you are raped, it is the fault of the rapist.
course,
Also,
yeah.
you
He
can
must
mitigate
be
your
prosecuted,
risk
yeah.
Right.
by not drinking heavily in the
It's
presence
just
of
the
young men,
simple
which
truth.
is
Yeah.
But she has to do this because her actual record is of being a fairly tough prosecutor. And so in the modern Democrat Party, in the era of criminal justice reform, in the era of believe all women, in the era of stripping people of due process on these rape cases, she has a liability because she, by Democrat standards, is pretty harsh.
She was actually a pretty
and
impressive prosecutor, I thought.
This
in
is
that
why
family,
she never talks about her actual professional record.
Yes.
She opens up on the mood mix, what music she liked to listen to. She went to an historically black college. It's all just, Peggy Noonan called it. She said it's just a mood that she's setting for her campaign. Because even if sometimes she was a weak prosecutor, any prosecutor is
Correct.
going to be dead in the Democrat
But
primary.
she does present certain challenges, I think, if she's the nominee. And right now, of the people who are declared, we have to call her the front runner. She's
No
the-
question.
Yeah.
The betting market.
She will do something if she winds up on a stage with Trump that will be for the left what Trump being on a stage with Hillary Clinton was to the right, which is she will prosecute him.
She'll call him a racist.
She will call him a racist to his face on national television, and the left will get the same sort of glee from watching that happen that the right got watching Donald Trump be on a stage with Hillary. I mean, that was all throughout the Republican primaries. The question, who would you rather see debate Hillary, drove a lot of the national dialogue. They're going to be having that exact same conversation on the left.
You know, she does have this legitimacy problem, though, or this authenticity problem, which Trump does not, in that she's positioning herself as the girl from Oakland, launched her campaign on Oakland. It's all intersectional identity politics, launches on MLK Day, always talking about going to an historically black college. She grew up from age 7 to college in Canada. She left Oakland. Her mother was a cancer researcher. Her father was a Stanford economics professor. This is not the rough and tumble streets of Oakland. And by pretending to be that way, she may fall into a Hillary Clinton path.
I don't think so. I mean, Barack Obama had exactly the same problem. It didn't matter to him one iota, right? I mean, he grew up not poor in a not minority discrimination area in Hawaii.
I think
And
also,
it-
though,
But the left creates the narrative.
The left is, you talk about the mood mix, but they all have done this. Elizabeth Warren with the beer, and that's all they do.
Beto with the dentist.
Because we had Beto with the dentist. I
Yeah,
mean,
but-
they all do. And I think that they're making a mistake. I do think that people care about policy. I do think that Obama ran as a centrist the first time out, and he only canted left after he was elected. And I think that people do pay attention, and she is a far left candidate, and I think that's going to help Trump.
Well, it will if you can shut up, right? I mean, that's really it. I mean, if he provides for any sort of target, then she will be famous for demolishing the target that's in front of her.
Mm-hmm.
If he can be quiet and just let her talk. In the first week, she had to walk back her Medicare for all, get rid of private insurance nonsense. She had to do that in like the first 3 days of her campaign.
This is why I'm not actually sure that she is a far left candidate. I think that she understands the temperature. I think she is a very shrewd, calculating politician who understands that in the era of Trump, in the ascendancy of people like AOC, this whole freshman class in the Congress, that there is a major leftward lurch happening in the Democrat Party right now, and she's willing to play to it, especially in a primary where she needs to rally her base and she needs to make sure that Bernie Sanders doesn't get back in and divide up the party. I don't think that Kamala Harris is an ideologue. I think Kamala Harris is I'll sleep with Willie Brown to get power.
But you know, this is the
she
issue.
is a power politician.
Bill Clinton was, for a few years, a far-left politician, pushing Hillary care.
Yes.
And then he loses in '94, and he becomes basically a center-right politician. If you are rudderless, if you don't have any ideological mooring, and you just happen to act in a very conservative or very leftist way, what's the difference?
No, I think that this is a very optimistic read on Kamala Harris. I think that she is an ideologue who is also a clever politician, and she knows where the tea leaves are. And what she's doing right now is there are several segments of the Democratic base, and you have to win a plurality within each and within most and a minority in a couple. And so if you split it up into various segments of the Democratic Party, to use the 538 model, there's sort of the black wing of the Democratic Party, the Hispanic wing of the Democratic Party, the millennial wing of the Democratic Party, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and the moderate wing. Those are the 5 categories that 538 has laid out. And she is the one who is best qualified to grab some of these and a little bit of the others, right? So she's not going to do that great among millennials because millennials don't like criminal justice stuff that she was involved in. She doesn't have to do great there. All she has to do is split the vote a little bit there, win the black vote, win some of the Hispanic vote, not all of it. If she has a unified block of black votes in her corner for the primaries, and she has some Hispanic votes, and she does well with sort of the mainstream Democrats against Joe Biden. Let's say she splits that, let's say he wins it 70-30. And then let's say that with the progressives, she only wins 20%, but nobody else wins more than 20%. all she has to do is outscore everyone in one category, and she runs the table. I mean, this was the Trump path to victory in 2016. He didn't win 70% of the vote in the primaries. He won 40% of the vote in the primaries, and in most of them, he won 25 to 30% of the vote. And because there were 1,000 candidates, the vote split enough ways that it didn't matter. That's all she has to do. And so what she's doing right now is she's ticking off boxes. So she's doing okay, I'll pay homage to AOC. And I'll pretend that I like AOC's thing, and I'll pretend that she's clever because that's where the energy is. And then I'll grab a couple of those votes. And what she really is counting heavily on is doing really well with black voters in the Democratic primary, because that was Obama's path to victory in 2008. She's hoping to duplicate that. The only person who can threaten her there is Cory Booker, and that's where what Michael is saying could theoretically pose a problem for her, maybe, because Booker actually did grow up pretty impoverished.
Streets in Newark,
he is from Newark.
He's such a bad politician.
He is an awful. This is the problem for him: is that he is an awful, insincere, terrible politician who is bad at everything. I mean, he really is. I mean, he's one of the worst politicians I've ever seen in my entire life, and that's from a guy who actually has a unique capacity to grandstand. He spent his entire career grandstanding.
That's true.
But now the grandstanding comes off as so false and so fake that I'm not sure anybody can even buy into it. Is it even possible to buy into Cory Booker at this point?
He couldn't even lead a gladiatorial revolt against Rome. They were all crucified.
So if you want to write in your complaints about our stamps.com, that's where you're going to want to turn. What I like about stamps.com, other than that they sponsor the show, which of course I appreciate, is that they have removed from me the need to ever visit the post office.
Yeah.
I don't go to the post office.
I know, and especially in LA where the post office is 10 minutes away and it takes you 40 minutes to get there.
Correct. I don't want to drive to there.
And it's like everything else. You want it in your computer.
Correct.
And not just that, you can actually get cheaper postage rates. So stamps.com gets you big discounts off post office retail rates. With stamps.com, you save 5 cents off every first-class stamp and up to 40% off priority mail, or if you're a small business, that's saving a lot of money. Stamps.com automatically calculates and prints the exact amount of postage you need for every letter or package you send. You're never going to overpay or underpay again. They are bringing all the services of the U.S. Postal Service directly to your fingertips. You can buy and print official U.S. postage for any letter, any package, any class of mail using your own computer and printer. They make things really, really easy. We use stamps.com here at the Daily Wire offices because it means we don't have to schlep all of our packages down to the post office. Plus, we save a bunch of money. Right now, our listeners get a special offer. It includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage and a digital scale, which is a pretty solid deal. All you have to do is go to stamps.com and you click on the microphone at the top of the homepage and you type in promo code Shapiro. That's stamps.com, promo code Shapiro, and you can get that discount. You can get that special deal. Again, you're not going to regret it. You're going to save yourself a lot of money, save yourself a lot of time as well. Go check them out. Stamps.com. Click on that microphone at the top of the homepage and type in that promo code Shapiro. Stamps.com, promo code Shapiro. Go check
I live
it out.
1 block from this office because I don't like to go anyplace.
No,
there's nowhere I want to go.
Nobody in LA likes to go anyplace. We never talk about this. You know, you go home and it's like, should I go out? No. You know, it's like now that everything's on your TV, you don't have to go out.
I ordered soup from across the street delivery today. That's true. I ordered it
Well, it's been raining.
It's been raining, you
raining,
know. I mean,
There's something about when the car is in the garage, you're done. You know,
Yeah.
you're finished.
So what do you think Trump's actually going to say in the State of the Union tonight?
Well, he's got, obviously, I think it's going to center on the border thing, and I
Do you think he's going to bring actual blocks and then he's just going to build a wall?
build the wall right
He's
where
like,
he's standing.
Watch me
there.
build this.
watch me do it.
I'm wondering if the Democrats are actually going to stand up and hurl Honduran children at him. You know, I think
At some point, he's got to turn around and say something to Nancy Pelosi, right?
I know you hate it when I say that I think Trump is doing something smart, but I really do. I think he has kept a fairly low profile, and he has allowed the Democrats. Wait, let me finish before you attack me, please. He's allowed the Democrats to be as crazy as they want. They now look like the unreasonable people. He has kept this subject that nobody on either side wants to talk about. He has kept it front and center, and he has made them look like the unreasonable people. And I think if he plays that without hammering them, which would be un-Trumpian, he could make some headway.
I think he has
you're-
potentially done something smart.
So when you're unconscious and you don't talk, is that a smart thing or is that you being unconscious?
Well, with me, it's a smart thing. Yeah.
Because
I work
you
at
always-
my unconsciousness.
You have the precise. So my rule about politics is never attribute to malice that which you can attribute to stupidity.
Me too.
But you
I'm
don't have
with
that
you.
rule with Trump. For you, it's never attribute to stupidity that which you can attribute to brilliance.
No, I think that Trump has two things that nobody talks about. Well, people do talk about his instincts. He has excellent instincts. He has the instincts of a linebacker. He knows where daylight is. He always knows of a running back. He knows where daylight is. And the other instinct that he has is he changes. People don't pay attention to it, but he actually changes tactics while seeming to be Trumpian all the time.
Yeah, this is the part where you're crazy. This is the part where you're crazy. You're talking about a man whose first tactic was to marry somebody and then have an affair with someone and divorce the first one to marry that one. And then his next tactic was to have an affair and divorce that one and then marry the third one.
That's
different-
That's
He has changed his tactics. It's been a while since he's
different area of
divorced.
different area of life where we're
I
all
think
a
that he's
little
done a few
stupid.
things that are potentially smart. The problem is that he's not particularly disciplined, and so to the extent that he ended the
Understatement
shutdown,
of the century right there.
to the extent that he ends the shutdown, which, if the purpose of that move is to get his State of the Union address back and to demonstrate that I am the only one compromising. I offered them the DACA deal, they didn't take it. They said we won't negotiate while the government shut down, so I opened the government. If he actually can now go through with shutting the government down again at the end of this, then I think it was some high-level chess playing.
You think he'll shut the government down again?
No, I don't think he
neither
will.
do I.
If
Which
he
is
did,
why,
though, if he did, it would be magnificent.
If he did, it would be magnificent.
Yep.
Then he would be being strategic and making a power play. What I actually think he's doing is just respond. I think you're right when you say that he's a linebacker who knows where the daylight is.
A running back.
He's a running back. I'm sorry. He's water, and he finds the crack and runs downhill.
I agree with that, too.
The problem is that isn't strategy. And so I think that he found a way out of the shutdown conundrum of the moment, but with no thought for the next moment
This is
where that was
exactly
going
I
to
would
lead
like
them.
to go back though to why this would be magnificent if he shuts the government down.
It's the only way it's magnificent.
Why?
If he doesn't shut the government down
We don't
at
get
the
the
end
wall.
at the end of his 3-week ultimatum, I'm going to open it for 3 weeks. He said, I'm going to open it for 3 weeks because they said they wouldn't negotiate while it was shut down. So now it's open, we can negotiate, and if they don't negotiate, I'm going to shut it back down. If he doesn't shut it back down, then all he really did was revealed that he was afraid of the government shutdown. He didn't actually have a plan. It is fear that's driving his decision making. It's just gravity pulling the water through the cracks and pulling the water downhill, and not strategy causing the water to find the place.
So I actually disagree. I think that if he shuts the government down, it's going to be bad for him again. I think that the only way that it was ever going to be good is you have to be willing to go through the pain and take as many hits as you're willing to take. If you're playing a game of chicken, you got to put the brick on the accelerator and just leave it there. Yeah. And when you take the brick off the accelerator, he's already demonstrated he doesn't like the government shutdown. And so what's he going to do? Okay, I'm going to shut the government down again, and the Democrats claim the exact same thing, and then the minute there's pain, the media blame him, and then he says, well, they weren't willing to negotiate. It's not going to go any better the second time than it went the first time. It's exactly the same math.
That's my guess too.
But all of this is just a setup for him to declare a national emergency.
That's what
and then
yeah.
we get what everybody wants except for the wall, right? He's going to blame the judiciary when they strike it down, and the Democrats are going to say we stood tall. He gets the win politically because he did the tough thing by declaring a national emergency, and the people who didn't back him are the cucks who didn't back him doing something that I think is actually constitutionally illegal, and then the wall doesn't get built.
It is worth pointing out, when we hear national emergency, we rightly sort of think of it as this crazy thing that shouldn't happen a lot. We do have currently, 28 national emergencies
It's
declared?
21, but yes, it's
21,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
Well, that's true, but a national emergency, by definition, is an event that happens immediately, that requires an immediate response, that there's already been delegated power to solve. Right, that's what the power of national emergency is that was delegated to the executive branch. So there are only two statutes under which the president could theoretically declare a national emergency. One is that he could declare that there is a drug corridor along the entire border of Mexico. Even that would not allow him really to use eminent domain to seize the property. You need congressional authorization in order to do that. He could renovate fencing. I mean, that he could do.
Yeah.
But the idea that he's going to rededicate a bunch of defense funding to build the wall, I think there's some real legal holes in that particular strategy. But I don't think that's design. I don't think that's what he cares about doing at this point.
No.
What he wants is to be able to say to his people, I did the best that I could,
Yeah.
and I couldn't do it. But that's not my fault. That's the fault of the judiciary. I even went far enough that I was willing to declare a national emergency. I did, and I think his people will buy it. I mean, I think that his base will buy it.
Because
but
they want any excuse to let him off the hook for this, when the reality is this was a huge fumble from the beginning. Shutting down, because let's imagine he had won.
Yeah.
He shuts down the government. They crack. They give him $5.7 billion.
You get 300 miles.
2 years from now, 50 miles of wall have been built against the promise of 250 miles of wall on a 2,700-mile border. The win was not worth the price, and he ain't gonna win.
Well, you'd want more than $5 billion. You'd want 25 or 30 billion.
Again, the whole purpose of this whole game was to paint the Democrats as not caring about border security, which he succeeded in doing, right?
yeah.
I mean, except that he should have spent, if you're going to declare a national emergency, if you're going to suggest that this is the end of the world and it's a huge crisis, you say that he was great because he went silent. It's good that he went silent in the last couple of weeks because Democrats have been making fools of themselves.
Yes.
But during the actual government shutdown, why was he not traveling by car to the border and giving a speech every day on why it was a border crisis? I'm sorry, sitting in the Oval Office and tweeting randomly things, that's not an actual strategy.
I think it was a strategy. I actually do. I think he was making sure that he was the reasonable guy. He made a good speech from the Oval Office. He made a good offer that the Washington Post was saying, sit down and negotiate with the guy. He made them look unreasonable. And it does seem to me,
But made them look unreasonable to who and where?
It's a weak to the people.
And
I think
his
the ordinary
approval rating has rebounded fairly well. I mean, it was pretty low during that shutdown.
Look, I think that there's not a lot of elasticity in his approval rating. I mean, I think that he's constantly been between 42 and 47% basically his entire presidency. And by most polls, he's had very little bounce since nearly the beginning. Like he was at 48 at the beginning. On average, I mean, I know people cite the outlier Rasmussen poll from daily tracking, but in the average, he's always 42, 43%. Yeah. That's fine. He doesn't have to be anywhere but there. All he has to do is defeat the Democrat who's put in front of him. In the end, I don't think a government shutdown actually matters. I don't even think the wall necessarily matters all that much. I think the only thing that does matter is him shutting up for the next couple of years, as I say. And if that's strategic, let it be strategic. Whatever it is, he needs to do that. Because the more the Democrats talk, what Kavanaugh proved is the more people see of Democrats, the more they despise the Democrats.
No.
And the more they see of Trump, the more they despise Trump. If you stay away from everything, if you just deprive the media of oxygen, they've got no place to go. They have to cover whatever the Democrats are doing at any given time.
The Democrats have shown that the people who voted for Trump, who said this country is in a serious precipice, they were right. They were right. They saw that the Democrats are this crazy. I think they always were this crazy. I think Hillary Clinton was a mask for how crazy they were. I think she was a moderate-looking mask. She was felled by her dishonesty and her being a poor politician. But behind them, they are really this bad. They really are talking about killing live babies. They really are talking about socialism. They're really talking about 90% tax rates. They're nuts. And I think he's doing the right thing. The thing about the emergency measure, and it's a weak strategy, but it is a strategy, is he could delay the decision long enough to reach 2020 and say, well, it's in the courts. It's all going to be, believe me, you're going to get your wall.
Well, they'll put up an injunction within the first month.
They'll put it up right away. Yeah, it's a question of how far it goes.
Yeah. I do think, though, that if Trump came out tonight for his State of the Union speech and he opens it up and says, "My fellow Americans, the state of our union is deeply troubling. In the last 2 weeks, 2 states have come out in favor of infanticide, the actual killing of babies who have been born. That's not, you cannot have an abortion once a baby is born.
Fourth trimester.
Fourth trimester.
Fourth trimester. 18th year.
And in the last 3 months, we've seen the Democrats ascend a brand new crop of congressional leaders who are openly calling for socialism within one generation of us defeating
that would be great.
Our existential enemies in the socialist Soviet Union. Then I think that we would all go, well, yep, the guys got it.
And this is what I was saying on my show today, is that the problem is, like, they're constantly trying to cast him against type. And everybody who tries to cast him against type fails. He's never going to start being the nice unifier.
Yep.
It's not going to happen. There's no world tonight where he says, I call for unity and reason to come on. He's Donald Trump. I call for unity and so much reason it'll make your head swim. Reason out the wazoo. Like that's not going to work.
I am the unity president.
He won in 2016. The primaries and the general, because he was a hammer in search of a nail, as I said 1,000 times. And sometimes he had a nail, and sometimes he had a baby. Okay, all he has to do right now is hit a lot of nails. Let him be the hammer. Let him go out there tonight and turn around and say directly to Nancy Pelosi, let him turn around on the podium in front of the American people and say, listen, I offered you legal status for all the dreamers who you are constantly suggesting you want to stay in this country. And all I asked for in return is that you give me the money necessary for us to secure that border. And you won't even negotiate with me.
He might do that.
Because you don't care about borders.
He might. That sounds more like Trump than what you were saying.
But he should do the same thing. He should say, there are several members of the Democratic caucus who have embraced openly anti-Semitic positions. And the Democratic Party is fine with it and celebrating them. Like, he should list out all the reasons Democrats suck, because he's not going to win by listing out all the reasons he's been great, because people who like him already tend to like him, and people who don't like him already tend to not like him. He's got to do exactly what he did to Hillary Clinton.
He doesn't need to sell himself.
Correct. His gift is he can take anyone and drag them through the mud. That is his gift in life. Right? Some of us are given the gift of wit and brilliance and good looks. But enough about me. Yeah. You also have to. He has a unique gift to drag people down and stomp on them with cleats. Yeah. And if he's not doing that,
he's got a good target too.
And he's got a great target. Yeah. If he'd ever been able to direct that like 100% of the time, he would be an actual weapon.
Oh, we all used to watch those debates with Hillary Clinton. We all used to say, like, almost, you know, it's
Exactly,
all, you know,
exactly.
but it was enough because people knew who she was. Now, you know, listen, I think that's a speech he could make. I don't think he's going to make it tonight because I don't think he thinks this is the moment. I think he does think this is the moment for him to appear reasonable. He'll make that speech eventually, though. No
right, but the
question
problem
about
is that
Maybe.
you run out of time. You only have one chance to characterize your opposition. This is the mistake John
That's
McCain
right.
made in 2008. Right? John McCain thought, okay, I'll wait. Last month of the election, hey, by the way, this guy Barack Obama, pretty radical. And everybody's like, well, we already made up our mind about this guy. You said he's decent.
You said he's a
wouldn't
nice family man.
Right, exactly. You said that he's fine. Mitt Romney made the same mistake in 2012. It was
That's right.
You can
Barack
never
Obama,
win. You're
nice
right.
family
Yeah.
guy, decent, moderate. I don't think he's crazy in any way. And then at the end of the election, it was, well, actually, this guy's pretty radical, and he's got a bunch of crazy policies. Trump right now needs to be defining every one of the Democrats. Like, I wouldn't mind if he went out there and gave nicknames to 25 Democrats tonight. Like Crazy Cory Booker.
You just want to be entertained.
Well, yes, bring
That's the
me
point of the
the
round.
entertainment.
That's the point of the
Oh, you're
round.
not
We're sitting
entertained?
here.
So the most entertaining thing that's happened to me today is that Emily, our director of marketing and audience development, brought me a pitch. And I think it's a little too late this year, but we're going to circle back on this next year. It's a pitch for a Valentine's Day card. On the front, it says, "Facts don't care." You open it, but I do.
Aw.
Happy Valentine's Day on the Ben Shapiro Show. And I feel like we're going to make millions of dollars off of it. It actually has a human heart, not like a cute red heart, but an actual human heart. And as I looked at it, I thought, would I actually want to receive this? And then I remembered Sherri's Berries, who sent me some amazing strawberries last week, and I thought, nah, we're not going to make any money off these greeting cards. Got to give your Valentine's money to Sherri.
I ate Sherri's Berries before they became a sponsor, and they're like insane. They're some of the best things ever.
As you know, I keep kosher, and that means that a lot of the products that I endorse, I talk
Right.
about how much people in the office enjoy them because I can talk about that because I'm not eating them. Sherri's Berries sent me a bunch of kosher stuff. Oh my
It's unbelievable. I know.
God.
I know.
They
It's
are,
unbelievable.
I mean,
Yeah.
we had some of their cookies and we had some of their caramel. It's the greatest stuff. Legitimately. Like my wife, immediately, we went to somebody's house the next day for lunch and we forgot to bring a gift. And so she's like, well, you know what we should do? We should order them some Sherri's Berries and have them send it to their house. She'd only heard about it the day before because it is just
good.
How do
unbelievable.
they grow those strawberries? They're the size of like pumpkins. I mean, that's amazing.
Well, you're never going to go wrong with their signature dipped Valentine's strawberries. They're dipped in milk, dark, or white chocolatey goodness for any discerning palate. She's going to fall in love with every single bite. So if you want to get her something great for Valentine's Day instead of the drugstore sushi that you got her last year, instead you should try
Wait a
some
minute.
Sherri's Berries.
What was wrong
Always
with
fresh,
this?
always tasty, always worth the wait. They arrive fresh with a 100% Sherri's Berries guarantee. They ship anywhere nationally. So give sweet somethings to your long distance love. Send her the Valentine's gift of her dreams at the price of your dreams, starting at just $19.99 plus shipping and handling. So you're not spending a lot of money and you look like you actually care, which is my favorite thing, right? Plus order now and make this Valentine's really
That's his
special
business model,
by
yeah.
getting double the berries for just $10 more. Go to berries.com, click on the microphone and enter promo code DailyWire at checkout. That is BERRIES.com. Click the microphone, enter promo code DailyWire at checkout. Go order today. They really are spectacular. I mean, as I say, like I cannot
it's
speak
nuts, yeah.
more highly of
Yeah.
the chocolatey goodness that is Sherri's Berries.
You know, I
It's
got to
unreal.
tell you, I love that drugstore sushi. Sweetly Lalisa every year. That's
you're
how I
so
know she really
critical,
loves
you know?
me. You know?
I spent the last 4 months trying to get them as sponsors on the show. There it goes. Drugstore sushi. I'm never going to get them back.
So here's my actual big question. We all know what Trump's going to say tonight, and it's going to be pretty blasé. Like, I don't
'Cause
mean to
it's
be
a
a
State of
downer.
the Union address.
It's a State of the
Yeah.
Union address. First of all, note, quick show of hands. Who hates the State of the Union address and thinks it's garbage? Just as a general rule.
There we go.
Okay,
Now
there-
we're
Oh,
talking.
hang
I love
on,
it.
hang on. Spoiler alert. Fast forward to the next Democratic presidential administration. Show of hands. Who hates the State of the Union address?
Yeah, exactly.
No question.
No, but I don't hate it on principle. That's what you're
I
asking.
hate it on
right?
principle.
yeah,
I'm not
no,
talking about like
yeah.
Trump giving it or Obama giving it. I hate it. It's a monarchical garbage institution.
yeah.
The president of the United States is not the king. He is not a prince. He is not a potentate. Him descending into the chamber to the cheers of the legislature, and then people worshiping at his altar, taking selfies with him, and then the Supreme Court sitting there, an independent branch of government, sitting there, and in past years having the president rail at them in front of them and lie about them, which is what Obama did in front of the Supreme Court last
Yeah.
time. It's stupid. It is backwards. It is something instituted by Woodrow Wilson, which in and of itself means it's terrible. If Woodrow Wilson had a dog, no one should have a dog. Woodrow Wilson is one of the worst people ever to walk this
He
earth.
was certainly the worst president.
But this is true. No one had done the State of the Union for 100 or something years, except for George Washington. He
yeah.
gave a State of the Union address.
And then Jefferson did the best
Jefferson
thing.
got rid of it.
Right, Jefferson was like, nope.
Let me
not
tell you,
doing
if
this.
something is good for Washington and bad for Jefferson, I love it. I'm in.
So I have
Sign
two
me up.
But it's also good for Woodrow Wilson, which means it's bad for everyone.
So I have two questions. Will Ruth Bader Ginsburg be there? And two, is she alive?
So she doesn't
And
come. So
if she's there, will
never
she be
gone
alive?
to a Republican State of the Union address. I
Is
believe.
that true?
This is amazing.
yeah,
She
so-
only attends if a Democrat is the
People
president.
don't talk about this.
She's not partisan, though. She's a completely
yeah.
objective, law-abiding justice. Not a partisan hack in any way. She's the notorious
it's Ginny
RBG.
Thomas.
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
If anything, she's a moderate.
She's
That's what I've heard.
It is astounding. She is undoubtedly the most nakedly partisan Supreme Court justice in modern history, and they end up painting Clarence Thomas or Scalia.
Ginny Thomas.
That's or Ginny Thomas.
The real
That's
problem,
right.
the real
How
problem
they
is
get away
Thomas's
with that?
wife is partisan.
Right, that's really the issue. But in any case, the institution itself is bad. But the original question I was going to ask is, what do you expect from the response? Because that's more interesting to me. Like, I think Trump is going to come out, he'll give his unity speech, some people might yell or something. He'll do his thing where he points to the random folks in the rafters, there's Bob. Bob has suffered. Look at Bob. Bob. And then Bob just sits there and cries, and somebody hands him a handkerchief, like, oh, we all feel bad for Bob, don't we? Oh, a round of applause for
little
Bob.
Bob, yeah.
And then that's exactly what it'll be. I do have to note, it is amazing trollery that the one person who is bullied, who he could think to bring to the State of the Union address, is Joshua Trump.
He's a little kid there.
It's just
I know,
spectacular.
it's
I was desperately hoping that it would actually be like, and you know who's been the most bullied man in the United States? John Miller. And then they just cut up there, and there's a cutout of Trump with a mustache. It would be incredible. But tonight, Stacey Abrams is giving the response. And
Yes.
that I find more interesting because Stacey Abrams ran a competitive race in Georgia, specifically because she did not run a wildly intersectional race. She did well in suburban Atlanta, basically, because she was running on kind of almost Bill Clinton-esque policies. Like, the idea was that she was a moderate, who was trying to bring people together. She was doing the unity theme. And then she wrote a piece for Foreign Affairs, I don't know if you guys saw it, about intersectionality, why intersectionality is wonderful, why we need to be doing American politics on the basis of group identity. And so I think tonight she's going to go hard to the left. I think that she's going to go very hard to the left. She's going to say, I would not be surprised if tonight she straight out calls Trump a racist. If she says, there's a serious problem of racism in America, as we're seeing in Virginia, as we see in the White House every day.
With that
Right?
Republican Governor Northam, with that right.
And it's interesting, too, that, I mean, typically the response always gets bad reviews because it's just very hard.
They preemptively
but exactly, how are they going to give
hagiographies. It's
bad
crazy.
reviews to a black woman? They cannot do it. So
Yeah,
like,
they're already writing. I mean, if you've read she's not even given the speech or probably written it, right? And they were writing things about how great it was going to be preemptively.
Really? Who's
Oh
doing that?
yeah, I mean, it was like the Washington Post, like
the
people, Stacey Abrams. It's going to be incredible, guys. Like just wait, it's going to be incredible.
Yeah.
They've already pre-written their reviews. It's like before Oscar season, whatever is the most SJW film,
Yeah.
and nobody's actually seen the film.
Right, of course
It's like
not, yeah.
that's how Shape of Water ends up winning an Oscar. No one actually watches the film because if you spent 5 minutes with that film, aside from the greatest and most world famous of all actors,
did
Nick
have-
Searcy,
it did have Nick Searcy, yeah.
it is legitimately one of the. I think it is the worst film I have ever seen
You
in my
just don't
entire
like
life.
fishmen. You have a
Well,
thing about
I gotta say, I'm
Yeah, he
not,
never did.
He's anti-fishman.
I'm really not into fish. I'm not a fishophile.
You're, no,
Right,
you're,
I'm not into
you're
sleeping with the fishes.
Piscine phobia.
I don't like sleeping with the fishes. It's not a thing.
I don't think that means what you think it means.
So.
Yeah, I think that we're going to see the left tonight is going to give us the tone of what the next election is going to look like, right? So we're going to hear this hard tack to the left coming from the rebuttal. We're going to hear an even harder tack to the left coming from Bernie Sanders in the rebuttal to the rebuttal? The racist rebuttal.
The racist rebuttal.
That's right.
The pudding rebuttal.
He's kind of finished, Sanders. This is
He's got a
the
problem.
end.
He's done.
Well,
yeah.
they basically in 2016 they basically declared that he was never going to win another minority vote, and now they have created this narrative that he'll never win another minority vote,
Right.
so they can make way for Kamala Harris and Cory Booker.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you.
Because the dream was never to win an election. The dream is to recapture not the Obama 08 coalition, the Obama 12 coalition. That's the one they care about. Because the 08 coalition was Obama, like it or not, his basic message was appealing to the better angels of our nature. That's what he was
Absolutely.
trying to do,
I
right? It was
completely agree.
it wasn't not red America, not blue America. We're all Americans, right? There was that routine. And then by 2012, it was we're black Americans and we're white Americans. We don't like each other. But you should vote for me.
Yeah.
And that was his routine. And so
No,
they were
no
campaigning.
politician in the modern era has had a greater opportunity to do good in the world than Barack Obama.
This struck
in
me, and
2008.
I said this to you on the day the Northam scandal broke. I said,
Yeah.
imagine a country where, let's say there was a Republican governor, for sake of example, and the Republican governor had a picture like Northam, and it had happened during Obama's tenure. And Obama had come out and said, listen, we are a country of forgiveness. About a Republican governor.
Yes.
We're a country of forgiveness, And we understand that contexts change. Sometimes people do things that are stupid. It doesn't mean that they're vicious racists. It means they're ignorant.
Yeah.
And it means that they're educated and we get better as a country. And in the light of that, we have to look at the compendium of a man's life and determine whether that person ought to be condemned and
Just the
roundly
virtue of being
condemned.
true, right?
Right, which all of
Right.
which would be true. But he could have been
And
the
which
one to say
Obama
it as a black man,
uniquely
right?
could have
He could
done.
right. He could have said, as a black man, we have to be a country of forgiveness.
He could
if
have
we are
said,
ever
as a
going-
black man with a white mother raised by white grandparents who did their best, I more than anyone have seen the capacity of a man to try to correct historic wrongs.
But they were typically white. That was-
They were typically white.
And that was the problem with Obama, is that he decided in 2012, and really as soon as he became president, that it was more important for him to win on the back of polarizing racial rhetoric than it was for him to actually
I
bring
think
the country together.
What I observed when he was doing it was that his policies, Obama was a guy who didn't know what he didn't know. And all his policies failed. Everything he did failed. Every single thing he did went bad. And that's when he really went hard, I think, on the cops and the
But that started
Lives
from the beginning.
Matter
Henry Louis Gates was 2009.
That's
So I think that what happened is that he got into office and he came in with 85% approval rating.
Yeah.
And he thought, my whole life in politics has been pretty easy, right? I basically sailed from victory to victory. I've
Haven't
never
shown
lost.
up to my votes.
Right, and they made me president, for God's sake, right?
Yeah.
In a sweeping victory over a national war hero, right? Who was 8 years ago hailed as the savior of the Republican Party, and John McCain, the maverick. And I just walked all over the guy by doing nothing, basically. And here I am. And here's a bunch of my policies. Why can't we all just get behind my policies? And I think that within the first month, after he started proposing the auto bailouts, and after he started talking about the stimulus programs, and there was backlash, I think that he went, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. And at that point, if he'd been a better man, if he'd been a better person, what he would have said is, people don't like my policies, and we can have legitimate disagreements on policy without me maligning their character. And instead what he did is, they don't like my policies because they're racist.
That's
they don't
right.
like
Yeah,
the
that's
Tea
right.
Party is a bunch of racists. The people who don't like Obamacare,
And that's who
a
he
bunch
really
of racists.
was, though. I think that's how he always
Of course,
had
he
been
was,
up to
he was
that
in Jeremiah
moment.
Wright's church for 20 years.
Yeah,
Of course,
of
that's
course,
who he was.
right.
But he masqueraded as something else.
Yep.
And that's why Trump was a response to that, and not a pretty response to that, by the way.
Do you think is there any well of optimism in you where we look at these 8 years? Obama was an incredibly divisive, trollish president. Worse in some ways than Trump. That's not as
many
obvious.
ways.
It's just not as obvious as Trump. And now we have this guy who is divisive no matter how you look at it. He's very harsh. His attitude, his affect is so harsh and divisive. Do you think there's anything in the American people, like when I saw Harold Schultz, the coffee guy, I was thinking, I don't think this is the time when a third party can win, but I think a third party can win. I think maybe not this election, but I think there's a time coming when people start to say, the people I disagree with, I live next door to them. They're not that bad. I'm sick of screaming at everybody. I'm sick of everybody screaming at me. Is there a time when the 70% of the people who kind of agree are going to get together?
Schultz is the wrong guy because the left won't vote for anybody who is financially successful anymore. Really, I think that this is a thing. Like, if you're too financially successful, then they'll tear you down. But
I mean,
think
AOC said that billionaires' existence
Yeah.
is immoral.
Yeah.
well, I do
It's a
love
scary thought,
there's
yeah.
that internet meme where you see the guy who has to choose between two buttons and then he's sweating because he can't choose between two buttons.
Yeah.
So they should make that meme, except it's AOC. Billionaires are immoral, and we need to tax billionaires to pay for my program, right? Because which one is it? But with all of that said, like, I agree with you that if there was somebody, I really think in really divided times, the only people who can win and create a consensus around them are people who are members of institutions that are well respected. One of the big problems we have right now is that all the institutions of America are no longer respected, meaning no one trusts the press, no one trusts the banks, no one trusts the educational system, no one trusts the churches, no one trusts the police even. The only one there's still a certain level of wellspring of
military.
respect is the military, and even there, the left has some mixed feelings about that. But let's say that General Stanley McChrystal were to run on a third-party ticket, and he were to say, listen, I think socialism is off the table, I'm not going to begrudge success, I think that America is a great country, and we can come together around something. I think that he would probably draw 15% of Republicans, and I think that he'd probably draw 10% of Democrats. And I don't think that he'd win, but I think that he would win 15 to 20% of the vote overall. I think Schultz right now, running as a third-party candidate, would win somewhere between 7 and 10% of the vote.
Schultz
I
would be
think
much
that's
more
about right.
dangerous.
He also has no charisma.
He's much worse for Trump than he is for the Democrat.
I don't think so.
I don't think that's right either. And the reason for that is because Trump's base is Trump's base, man. That base has been so locked in. Like, if you are planning on voting for Trump for re-election, there is nothing that can happen that is going to dissuade you from voting for
But
Trump.
you're
And
talking
the Iowa
about you're
polls
talking
show
about
this,
a
by the way.
20% base.
No, I'm talking about Trump's base is solid. It is not 20%. His base is about 35% of the American
think
public.
so?
Yeah, I don't think it goes any lower than that. I think that and you can look at the polls in Iowa, because what they were showing was that, like, when you match up Trump with Elizabeth Warren, it shows that he beats Elizabeth Warren in Iowa by 52 to 48. Now, that was before we all learned that she's Native American. So maybe that changes the
people
fact pattern
don't
on the
like
ground.
those Indians. Right?
But now that she's off the reservation, the polls may change. But it goes from 52. But when you add Schultz to the mix, that's not making fun of Native Americans. Idiotic. Media Matters. That's called making fun of Elizabeth Warren. Native Americans are wonderful and historically victimized in the United States. Elizabeth Warren is a white woman who is not historically victimized in the United States and claims credit of historical victimization for political purposes. Let me explain it to you because you're okay.
I believe.
And for all the people who Media Matters will call, that's what I'm saying. Okay, can I be any clearer about this? You idiots. Okay, so with all that out of the way, now back to our story. When you add Howard Schultz to the polls, what it shows is that he wins 11% of the vote, and Trump's margin goes from 4% to 9%.
Really?
So he is taking because think of the battleground sector right now. The battleground sector is not the urban population. I'm not talking black. I'm talking about urban. I'm talking because urban white people also vote for Democrats. It's not the urban population, which is solidly Democratic. It is not the rural population, which is solidly Trump. It is the suburban population, which swung heavily for the Democrats in 2018, which is why we got walloped in 2018. That population looks at someone like Schultz, who is non-threatening, feels like a return to normalcy candidate, feels like, okay, well, like I look at Schultz and things are so crazy. I disagree with him on policy more than I disagree with Trump on policy.
Yeah.
I look at Schultz and I go, he's saying some reasonable things.
I agree.
I wouldn't. I'm not going to vote for him, but I look at him and he says things like, "Why are we begrudging success in this country? You know, I grew up poor, and I now run an $84 billion corporation, or whatever it is, and that's great because that's what America is, and we should stop beating each other over the head." And I'm like, how is he the only person saying this?
But he is genuinely an inspiring figure in a totally backwards culture. So he grew up in the projects in Canarsie.
Yeah.
He becomes the head of, he builds one of the great corporations, and it'll hurt him. It'll only hurt him.
Yeah. So one thing I don't know if the president will talk about tonight, but I think we all hope that he does, is the Second Amendment. We have, this whole new crop of Democrats. Everybody who's running right now, basically, is running on some form of ultimate
gun confiscation. Yep.
I mean, it's the most radical gun positions we've ever heard from mainstream candidates. We have friends over at Bravo Company Manufacturing who I think are as good on these issues as anybody in the country.
No question. Bravo Company Manufacturing was started in a garage by a Marine veteran more than 2 decades ago to build a professional-grade product that meets combat standards. BCM believes the same level of protection should be provided to every American, regardless of whether they're a private citizen or a professional. BCM is not a sporting arms company. So when you hear me talk about the Second Amendment, I've always said, I don't own a gun to hunt because I don't hunt. I don't own a gun for sport shooting because I don't really do a lot of that. I don't have time for it. I own it so that if someone comes into my house to do me harm, I can shoot them in the face, right? And if my rights are threatened, we can mobilize the society and stop the threatening of those rights, right? No, I mean, if someone comes in my house, they're getting shot in the face. In any case, whatever it takes to neutralize the threat, okay? I'm not going to say where I'm aiming. How about that? In any case, BCM, they believe that every rifle that comes out of their shop should be available to be used in a life or death situation. Every component of a BCM rifle is hand-assembled and tested by Americans to a life-saving standard, and they feel a moral responsibility to provide the tools that will not fail the user when it's not just a paper target, but somebody coming to do you harm. To learn more about Bravo Company Manufacturing, head on over to BravoCompanyMFG.com. You can discover more about their products, special offers, and upcoming news. That's BravoCompanyMFG.com. If you need more convincing, find out more about BCM at YouTube.com/BravoCompanyUSA. That is BravoCompanyMFG.com or YouTube.com/BravoCompanyUSA. I know the folks who run the company; they're really awesome folks. And again, these are people who are going to help save your life if, God forbid, something should happen. So go check them out at BravoCompanyMFG.com.
Yeah. So we do have these subscribers, DailyWire.com subscribers, who I don't think we do enough to say thank you to them. We have done one new thing.
I do. I give them 2 additional hours a day.
I was about to say, we
have
done one amazing thing for our subscribers of late, and that's the radio show, which for anyone watching who may not have tuned in since the last Backstage, Ben is now doing a nationally syndicated radio show. That means 2 additional hours every single day of the Ben Shapiro Show. And the only place you can get the show after its live broadcast on radio is at thedailywire.com by becoming a subscriber. The other thing you get to do, of course, if you're a subscriber, is ask us questions on this show. We have Alicia Krause. We'll be fielding your questions for you. We're going to take several during the hour after the State of the Union address. We want to hear from our subscribers, and I think we have time right now maybe to check in with Alicia and see if we have a few questions ready for us.
Oh, we have some really, really important questions, including one from Louise who wants to know if you guys can all show your best moonwalks and let the audience rate it.
inappropriate circumstances.
Yeah.
Other circumstances, I would.
Would you pass the
This is
shoe
an
polish over it?
Not all circumstances are inappropriate. This circumstance.
one.
I will say that around the office, Michael Knowles is known for grabbing his crotch. Really.
Yeah, but I've never heard of this Michael Jackson fellow.
Alicia, what's next?
Kyle says that this question is for everybody. He wants to know, do you think the Democrats will come to the table and negotiate with President Trump on the border wall before this new shutdown deadline or not?
Show of hands. Who thinks the Democrats are coming to the table to negotiate?
I think there's a small chance.
Do you really?
Yes.
Just
I
because
think there
Drew
was
is the most optimistic person on planet Earth. You're so
people-
irritating, Drew.
I'm sorry.
just
Now I
cut
feel
it out.
bad.
I mean,
No,
you're
it's
still
a
hoping for
disaster.
you're
We're
still
all
hoping for your
going to
hair.
die.
Every day he wakes up in the morning and says, maybe today's the day.
My hair
And
comes back. How did you know that?
What is
Get out of my head.
What is the narrow circumstance?
The narrow circumstance is that Nancy Pelosi loses control of the adults in the party, and the people who are on the committee are not so bad that they might. It's a small chance.
She is the adult
It's
in
a
the party
small-
now.
She's
That's
the
the
adult in
thing.
the
She's
party.
the adult in the party, right?
Just
AOC.
by age, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean even by temperament. Like the new fresh faces of the Democratic
Oh, they're
Party,
nuts.
so fresh, so face. Rashida Tlaib and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
The
they're
catcalling is out of control tonight.
They're fully crazy. Okay, these are crazy people.
They're crazy people.
Openly anti-Semitic. She had a call with Jeremy Corbyn 2 days ago.
I know.
But
He's
Ben-
an anti-Semite. He doesn't hide it. He hangs out with Hamas. And then somebody tweeted her like, you might want to check out his anti-Semitic background. She's like, oh yeah, I'm happy to go check that out. It's like, give me.
No, Ben, but Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, they're going to be so busy wiping Israel off the map that Nancy Pelosi can go negotiate with Trump.
Alicia, give us one more.
Absolutely. Rob really wants to know a fashion question this evening. Where did Michael get the Gomez Adams smoking jacket?
And why has nobody seen Gomez Adams? That's
This I got this from my godmother because only your godmother could ever buy you this sort of jacket. They don't make it anymore, and I think it turns
Why?
out
Why,
it's so
Michael?
weird. I mean, you think that you're rolling off the factory line, but it turns out not a whole lot of demand.
Off of which corpse did you get it?
Edmund,
The one that's out there the one out there in my studio. Or is it?
Nobody has seen Gomez Adams since he got that jacket.
Alicia, give us one more.
A real serious one actually comes from Lawrence. It's pretty good. He asks about looking ahead to 2020. If you guys think that the Republicans win back all three branches, number one, can they win it all back in 2020? And if they do, will they take defunding Planned Parenthood more seriously now that they've seen how radical the left is?
Michael, why don't you field this since your last question was about your apparel?
How many times can I say no? I don't think we're going to win it all back in 2020. I don't think, unfortunately, the Republican Party has not taken seriously defunding Planned Parenthood. I think there's a really perverse incentive here, which is that it's a great fundraiser, it's a great issue that you can run on, defunding Planned Parenthood. If they wanted to do it, if the political will were there, they would have done it. And I think the momentum is moving in the pro-life direction. But you forget, I've worked on campaigns in New York, Republican campaigns. There are a lot of Republicans out there who don't want to defund Planned Parenthood. And maybe as our politics gets more polarized, maybe sometime way in the future, there's a chance, but I'm not holding my breath for any of that.
Yeah, this is right. I mean, first of all, it's important to look at the actual Senate map. So the Senate map in the last election cycle was very positive to Republicans, which is why Republicans maintained the majority and picked up a seat. The next Senate map is not good for Republicans. The next Senate map has a lot more Republicans than Democrats who are up for re-election, and that means that there is a much stronger chance that the Democrats actually take the Senate than there is that Republicans gain seats in the Senate. And again, a lot of that is going to be dependent on President Trump down ballot. And if Trump gets blown out, then it's going to be an awful, awful term. I mean, if Trump gets blown out, then you have the possibility of Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, Kamala Harris as President, and Chuck Schumer as Senate Majority Leader. I mean, honestly, things are going to get so ugly so quickly because here's Jeremy and I had been talking about this for a while, and Jeremy's theory was basically the Democrats thought they were never going to lose again. And one of the reasons they're so angry about Trump, because they figured they had built this cohesive, durable coalition of minority groups that were going to carry them to victory. It was a growing majority country and all of this. And then Trump stopped that. And once you built, and now it's just pressure building up behind the dam. And if the dam goes, the speed is going to be, the velocity is going to be incredible. The amount of particularly anti-religious bigotry that's going to be unleashed if the Democrats take back all three both branches of the legislature and the executive, and then reshape the judiciary to meet their needs. I mean, if Ruth Bader Ginsburg is able to make it through Trump's term, and then the next justice to go, and then the next justice to go aside from Ginsburg is somebody like, God forbid, Thomas, and the balance of power shifts on the court again back to the left, and Democrats have unified control of all three branches of government, I mean, I'm not sure the country is savable at that point, really, because I do wonder whether it'll be impossible for religious people to live in the state of California, whether we all have to move, whether it is possible for people with high income to live in any place around the coasts. But I'm mostly worried about religious folks, because rich people will find a way to live.
Yeah,
they always do.
But religious people, I mean, I'm deeply concerned about this.
I don't blame you on this.
What I saw, as a religious person, what I saw in the state of New York, where they just passed this anti-gay conversion therapy law that's not actually about gay conversion therapy. That law actually says in there that if you bring your child to a therapist who discusses with them sexual identity,
right,
then that person can be prosecuted.
And even if the person says, I want to change.
Right, and it's not even about sexual orientation change therapy, which is controversial at best and a waste of time, at most, or damaging at most. We're talking about a 7-year-old goes in who's a boy, and the parent says, no, you're a girl, actually. And you go to a psychologist for this. That's illegal in the state of New York now. I mean, this is insanity. And not only that, I think the chances that they start cracking down on religious institutions are 129%. You see it with Karen Pence, right? They're already going after Karen Pence for having the temerity to go teach at a Christian school that is a voluntary association supported by zero taxpayer dollars. And there's an article by Richard Cohen today saying that because Ralph Northam may have to step down as governor of Virginia over his yearbook photo 35 years ago, Mike Pence should have to step down as vice president of the United States, and Karen Pence should be ousted from polite society for having the temerity to teach at a Christian school.
I should say, though, just a note of hope, because that does sound pretty dark. I do think today, just looking at the Democrat field, I don't think we retake anything, but I do think President Trump stands a very good chance of re-election, not against a generic Democrat, but there's no such thing as a generic Democrat, and the leaders right now I don't think could beat him.
Well, let's ballpark it. I mean, what percentage do you think? I mean, I know, listen, it's early, none of these numbers are fungible.
By the
I'm not
way,
putting money down.
Events change everything.
By the way, for the people who are tuning in at home, we're getting very close to the arrival of President Trump in the House chamber. We just saw the justices of the Supreme Court taking their seats, and for anyone who is taking bets at home, the notorious Ruth Bader Ginsburg is not among them. So,
actually, only 4 of them are, right? So Clarence Thomas didn't show up. It's Kagan, it's Roberts, it's Kavanaugh, and it's Gorsuch. Those are the only 4 who showed up. Everybody else stayed home because they had better things to do, unlike us. They're not getting paid by subscribers.
I literally had something better to do. It's my birthday.
I know. Subscribe just to support this man on his birthday. My goodness. I mean, we are here working our fingers to the bone and drinking ourselves into oblivion just for you. The least you can do is spend $9.99 a month to subscribe, or $99 a year, where you can get the finest in beverage vessels.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do want to say one thing, because I'm the only person here who doesn't work for you. And so I think, therefore, I'm the only person who can say this with sincerity. I think you single-handedly changed the abortion conversation in America over the last 3 weeks. I think you did your podcast from the March for Life. 1 million people listened to the podcast, making it the most coverage that the March for Life has gotten in at least the last decade, and I think probably in the last 20 years. Yeah. And there was this immediate pushback from the left. They usually like to ignore abortion, and in particular ignore the March for Life, but they saw the kind of spotlight that you were able to bring to that event. They immediately had to pounce and prove just how radical they are on abortion, which I think is such a winning issue for us. So I really think this may be the most consequential political thing that you've done in your career.
I mean, I certainly hope so, because I think it's the most important issue that there is in America. I really believe, Thomas Jefferson wrote about slavery, that he trembles when he thinks that God's justice cannot sleep forever, and that's exactly how I feel about abortion.
I agree with you. I agree with
God,
you 100%. Yeah.
The fact that God has held out his judgment on us in a country where we're killing 1 million babies a year, God is a merciful being, but that mercy, it cannot be held off forever. And by the way, nor should it be if we continue this nonsense.
And it also is just the underlying philosophy that allows people who are not insane, who are not themselves psychopathic, to go forward and say that you should be able to kill babies the moment before they're born, or the moment after they're born. This is a psychopathic. I remember watching a movie.
The First Lady, by the way, walking into the House chamber now and greeting people on her way to her seat. So we're getting very close.
We are seeing a bunch of Democrats who are dressed in white, as Drew mentioned earlier. Last time this many Democrats were dressed in white, they were wearing hoods.
I remember watching a movie about the Tuskegee Airmen, the Black Air Corps, and this actor was playing a senator who was slinging racial slurs. And my daughter came in and said, "Is this guy insane?" And I said, no, the idea was insane. You can have a psychopathic idea that turns sane people into madmen. And I think that this is the abortion thing in front of us in real time. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the compliment. And also, but back to, I am interested in hearing kind of your ballpark figure. If you had to put odds on Trump being reelected, say out of 100%, what percentage reelection do you think? What do you think, Knowles?
It's over 50% right now, judging by the leading characters. If a really good candidate, Beto O'Rourke is an example of a very charismatic candidate. I'm sure he can do really well on the ground in places like Pennsylvania. But
I think Beto's blowing himself out. I think
Really?
his self-obsession and that diary that he wrote about himself.
Yeah,
that was tremendous.
Traveling around Texas, gazing at the stars,
On
thinking
the
to
road.
myself, man, skateboarding is rad.
But if you've got a really good candidate, I think they could play, a candidate could play well in Pennsylvania, Michigan, wherever, then you'd have a really good chance. I just don't trust them to do it. They've driven themselves so wild. They've driven themselves so left. I don't see Kamala Harris beating him. I don't see really any of the others.
It is an interesting question in this moment. Can a Democrat capable of winning the primaries win the general?
I mean, where are you on this?
I'm pretty much where Knowles is. I think right this minute, events are going to change everything. All kinds
Right,
of
we're
candidate
saying if the
changes,
election were held
everything.
today,
But
yeah.
if the election, I think he's over 50%. I think he's got a 55% chance of winning right this minute. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he has a 100% chance of winning and a 100% chance of losing. And I realize that that's a pretty cheeky thing to say. But what I really mean is that we are so through the looking glass politically right now. I've been saying for over a year we're post prediction, because
Well, that's right.
because
Yeah.
the reality of the country and the perception of the country about itself are both in such an heightened state at the moment. You don't know, are people going to vote on the basis of reality, on the basis of perception of reality, or on the basis of virtue signaling about themselves. And because I can't actually figure out because I think it changes from moment to moment,
Yep.
what the driving need of the American electorate is today. It isn't need like, we're the richest people who've ever lived. We're perfectly secure in a time of peace. Things are actually quite
Right, the
good.
kind of emotional hole that we need to fill at the time.
That's
yeah.
right. And so with that in mind, I literally think anything could have. We live in the timeline where all things are possible.
I agree with that because what I really think is we do not know who we are, and I think that's what's happening right now.
We've lost our way.
I wouldn't say that. I think who we are has changed, and we haven't quite figured out what it's changed
So,
to.
so for the pessimistic
Yeah.
view of the situation, what I will say is that
You?
suburban, right? Who could have predicted? Suburban women hate Trump.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They really hate Trump. The Republicans did show up to vote in 2018, and they got blown out by 9 points in the
sure.
House races. I think that Trump. Look, you could hit a weird news cycle. You could hit a Kavanaugh news cycle right during the election, and Trump could squeak to victory. I don't see a sweeping victory for Trump because I think there are just too many states that are off the table. Democrats are starting with 230 electoral votes or something.
Yeah.
So I think that the idea that he wins some grand sweeping victory is nonsense. It is easier to see a sweeping victory for Democrats than it is for Republicans. Things go wildly wrong. The economy goes down, and Trump loses Florida. He loses Georgia. He loses Arizona. He starts running competitive in Iowa. Like, it's interesting to watch as certain states move more into the red and certain states move more toward blue.
Yeah.
Like Colorado was a purple state. Now it's a blue state. Arizona is moving toward a blue state pretty quickly. Iowa is moving more red, and so is Ohio, which
Yeah.
is really kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It charts really well with non-college educated white population, actually. But with all of that said, I'd have to put the odds for Trump at no better than 35% right now.
Wow.
Just because he is. Who has not made their mind up about this man? In 2016, everyone made the mistake of thinking that the election was a referendum on Donald Trump because he was the one who was sucking all the oxygen out of the room. And it ended up not being a referendum on Trump. It ended up being a referendum on Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump performed exactly like generic Republican. He won nearly the same percentage as Mitt Romney in virtually every state. And he won because it was a referendum on Hillary. People decided they didn't like Hillary. The Comey letter broke a week before the election. People decided, we're just not going to show up for her, and we think she's going to win anyway, so why would we possibly show up for her? That referendum on Hillary paid off to his benefit. The question in 2020 is it a referendum on him or on the Democrat? When you're the incumbent, it's usually a referendum on you.
Yeah.
But it is also possible, this is why I say I keep saying this over and over, but it's actually true. Like, if people around him have the capacity to shut him up for a year and a half, then we can have a referendum on the Democrat, which is what you want. You want a referendum on Kamala Harris. You want a referendum on Beto O'Rourke. You want a referendum on whomever it is they nominate. But if it's a referendum on Trump, I think that he loses.
We
and I
also
don't
have
think it's
we
particularly
also
close.
have to face down the Miller investigation, which we're probably on the brink of having answers about that.
I
But
think
it
it ends
does
up
live,
being nothing, by the way.
it does live
I agree.
between here and there. So we're gonna. I think
There he is.
it's time to go and hear from the president. We're gonna be listening, and we'll be joining everybody back 1 hour from now, or at the end of the speech, one eternity from
Next
now.
year.
Next
Next
year.
year. Yeah, yeah.
With our thoughts, here's the president. And that was the president of the United States, Donald Trump, wrapping up his second State of the Union address, clocking in at like 1 hour 30 minutes.
It only felt like 7 hours
Yeah.
and 50 minutes. So.
It had some moments, though.
He did have moments. It really
Great
did.
moments.
I think that may have been. There were highs there that were the best he's ever been.
I agree.
Like there were certain things that he did there that were the best he's ever been, and some of them were exactly the sort of hammer-like attacks that we were looking for. A couple moments stick out to me. Obviously, his declaration that America will not be socialist,
This is a great moment.
which is great because Democrats still want to run away from that label, rightly. So you can see Nancy Pelosi sort of softly clapping in the background, not too loudly, but a little bit softly.
Wasserman Schultz actually standing ovation for that line.
Yeah, that's right. And then the other moments that came to mind, obviously the singing of Happy Birthday to the Holocaust survivor and the Tree of Life survivor, and Trump doing his little conducting thing from the podium. But that's a great American moment. I mean, and it's a great American story. The following story about the Holocaust survivor next to the guy who helped liberate Dachau. That's an amazing, amazing thing. And look, this is an unbelievable country. And when you come away feeling like it's a great country, the president did his job. So I think that
The
those
Americans are here is the line that the guy on the train is hearing. It's very inspiring.
Right, and then obviously his move on abortion, which I wish he had spent a little bit more time on, but he went very hard on it for the time that he did spend, and calling out Democrats on that issue was great. Now, my only problem, honestly, is that he buried the lead,
I
meaning
agree.
all that stuff, all the best stuff, was in the last 20 minutes. Like you could have skipped the 45 minutes in the middle and just gone to the end, and that was the best stuff in the speech. He did his immigration thing. We've heard the immigration thing before. It's good for what it's worth, but he went long on it. And when he talked about the greatness of the economy and all of this, that's fine. I mean, the media aren't telling that story. It's worthwhile for him to tell that story. He did make a gambit that worked. He played to the egos of the idiots on the other side of the aisle by saying, oh, look at all these women members of Congress, and they got up and cheered themselves. They wouldn't cheer low black unemployment, low Hispanic unemployment. They wouldn't cheer record employment overall. They wouldn't share any of those things, but you tell them that lots of women are working and you guys are in Congress and they're standing up and cheering
Giving
each other and giving
high
each other
fives.
high fives. I mean, it's just obnoxious.
Is there anything less appealing than that? Was there then these Democrat congressmen dancing and cheering themselves? Forget everything else in the speech. It really, I can't
It's
imagine.
an
that's gonna
unpopular
look good.
opinion, but I hate all girl power nonsense, and it's for this reason. We live in a country where women have a probably better shot now at graduating college than men. They have more political power in terms of the voting electorate.
There are more women in
men.
college than men.
There are more women in college
by a
than
long
men.
shot.
Yeah.
And yet, women cheer themselves in a way that would be so unbecoming of any other group of people, male, female, regardless of no one is allowed to celebrate themselves except women. And I'm with you. I thought it was a fairly disgusting display for these women. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did not clap during the speech. In fact, there were times where she would stand, as sort of the caucus would stand in support of.
She was
something
trying to
the
split the
president
baby, but Democrats have been very good on that the last couple of weeks.
yeah. But the one time that she's clapping is basically for her
She did miss a high
ascending
five.
power.
She did miss a high five.
There's nobody there.
Sort of like
to
this and
high
this,
five.
right? And there was no one
Which
there,
may be
which
the
is-
story of her life,
which
actually.
is pretty great. Now, there were a couple of low points for Trump, I thought, during the speech. I thought, obviously, his statements that, the economy is great and everything will be great if we can pass legislation and no investigation. And it was like this little side note right
It was
here.
an actual stupid moment.
It was a stupid moment.
Yeah.
It was a real misfire politically because even his own people were going, am I supposed to clap for that?
Was
Am I not
it?
supposed
Do
to
we
clap?
know? Was it in the written
I
speech?
think it was in the written speech.
Really?
Because I think it was. But it was a real, and I'm sure he insisted on it being in there, but it's a mistake because the entire speech is him flying over the top of a lot of these controversies, and
Yeah.
then he just sort of dives right down in the middle of one to say, everything will be great if you leave me alone, which looks far too defensive. That was one moment that struck me as particularly bad. And the other moment that struck me as particularly bad is when he was suggesting that we would be in the middle of a major war with North Korea
that
were
was
it not
silly.
for his
That
presidency
is
in the Oval
silliness,
Office,
yeah.
which of course is just absurdity on every level.
And, I certainly agree with you. I think the speech was built like a kind of a mountain. He got to the top of it. That last 20 minutes was fantastic. I can't help but notice, and I agree with you about the bad moments. The investigation thing was just like a kind of a clunky note, and the thing about Korea was ridiculous. However, the The story that he tells is not the story that the Democrats tell, and it is incredibly obvious and incredibly powerful that he is telling the story that this is a great country. And you know, the funny thing about that is it's almost corny when you say it, and it has the kind of jingoistic sound, but this is a great country. I mean, it's an amazing country, and the things that have happened here have happened nowhere else. This is the pinnacle of human civilization on Earth. Forever, forever. Never has life been as good as it is right at this moment. And the fact that we have a president who gets up and says that after 8 years of a president who was always kind of waffling around, apologizing to tyrants, always telling us we could be great, we might be great, we might someday, if we could only follow his lead, we might achieve greatness. To have somebody sit there and say, you know what, we have been handed a torch, we've been handed a flame of freedom that people died for from the very beginning, and it's our turn, and we have to do something about it. Just to hear somebody talk like that, it's uplifting and it's beautiful. And you know, I wish he could do it more.
It cut Stacey Abrams off the knees a little bit, so we're not going to be able to see her response because we're not licensed to see her response apparently. But it cuts her off at the knees because now if she comes out and she starts talking about all the problems with America, it seems almost petty.
Right.
I mean, after he went out there and paid homage to World War II survivors,
moon landing,
and 10-year-old girls surviving cancer, and then if you have Stacey Abrams out there talking about what a problem he is and America is in a terrible place and all this stuff, it was a pretty feel-good speech. So, you know, I think he accomplished his goal tonight, which I didn't think he was going to, and he did. I mean,
you know, I played this thing on my show today of Don Lemon interviewing Gladys Knight, who sung the national anthem at the Super Bowl, and she said, you know, in my day we sang the national anthem, we prayed when we went to school. She said things that everybody in this room would say and agree to, and Don Lemon said, aren't you going to hurt your career? Aren't you worried you might hurt your career by singing the national anthem? He's talking to the Empress of Soul, not the Queen of Soul, the Empress of Soul. Don Lemon is telling her she's going to hurt her career at 74 because she sang the national anthem. That is the difference, and it's such a core difference that even Donald Trump, for all the problems we have with him, can hit that note and really make it ring.
This is actually why the woman power thing bothers me. It's a microcosm of the greater problem you're describing, which is that a country where women are the most successful they've ever been in history shouldn't be celebrating as though women are, you know, like, finally someone said something nice about women, let's all celebrate, move in. But that's everything that the Democrats, every position they take is that you stand in the most prosperous country that's ever existed, and you basically try to make the argument that people here are economically oppressed. You stand in the country that innovates the healthcare that anyone on Earth today getting a pill, it was innovated in America. Anyone on Earth today getting a surgery, it was innovated in America. And you say that we have the worst healthcare system in the world, that they peddle this reality. And then they all buy into it and form a narrative around it. And then they all celebrate as though they legitimately, I think Don Lemon, I thought this watching the Super Bowl. You're watching the Super Bowl and they trot out all these civil rights activists from the 1950s and 1960s, you know, Dr. Bernadette King and John Lewis and all these characters. And I thought, you're having to trot out all these 70-year-old civil rights icons because there hasn't been a civil rights problem in this country in the last. You can't find a 40-year-old civil rights icon because there aren't any, because there has been nothing to stand against. But this perception that's peddled by Don Lemon and all the people who couldn't stand during this speech is that no, if anything, things are worse now. You know, at least back.
You know what's amazing? It just occurred to me when you watch that speech. You see all these Democrats, and they're constantly talking about check your privilege this and check your privilege that. Here is the fact. Everyone who is born today is privileged. Everyone who is born in the last 30, 40, 50 years in the United States, these are the most privileged human beings ever to walk the earth. So check your fucking privilege. Seriously, check your damn privilege. Like all these women who are dancing there, oh, look at us, we finally overcome. You didn't overcome a damn thing. Your grandmothers overcame something.
That's right.
Your great-grandmothers overcame something. And that's really what the speech was about, right? When Trump was saying, when he was paying homage, half the people he was paying homage to are people who are over the age of 70. And he was saying, you know, our privilege is to be their grandkids. Our privilege is to be their kids. They're the ones who did the heavy lifting. We're just here picking up the leftovers, and it's our job to push it on to the next generation. The one privilege that people will not recognize on the left is the privilege of having been born here and the privilege of standing on the shoulders of giants. They act as though the earth began spinning the moment they arrived here and that they've had to overcome such terrible burdens. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has not had to overcome a burden.
We live in a country. We live in a country.
Neither have I, by the way.
No,
and neither has anyone who is living in the United
country.
States to get a, with very rare exceptions. There are some people who have to overcome burdens.
We live in a country where a young woman in her 20s of Hispanic origin can go from being a bartender to a sitting United States congressman and complain about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and consider herself a victim.
consider herself a victim.
And say that she's not privileged.
But-
right? That
and-
she's, and then when she does acknowledge her privilege is that she's a cisgender woman, as though that's the privilege. No, the privilege is that you live in this country. The privilege is that you are who you are at a time that is this time. And that's why when Trump said, this is what the left never understood about Trump's slogan, Make America Great Again. It was never about this idea that America was ever at any point in the past a utopia. It was about the idea that the people who inhabited America were infused with the idea of an American dream, that they were motivated by that idea. And if you want to make America great again, you have to get back to that idea that motivated people, our grandparents, to storm the shores of Normandy. You think anybody in that chamber is storming the shores of Normandy today? They're barely storming the shores of UC Berkeley.
Yeah.
This is the thing that makes this speech so jarring, even for me in this culture, but especially for people on the left, is gratitude. We have utterly lost a sense
really
of gratitude.
true.
It is nothing but pride and entitlement that people feel. And so he goes out and he says, thank you. Thank you for what you did, guy who stormed the beaches in Normandy. Thank you for what you did. And it's so, we're just not used to saying thank you anymore. And this guy, the billionaire
Who has never said thank you in his life.
Right, and
Right?
he really is embodying that.
And you know, we always have this joke between us about me being an optimist. But think of my life for a minute. I'm 152 years old. I've never seen a major war. I've seen racism, and I've seen it disappear. I've seen it disappear. It vanished. You know, it was gone. And I think it's not personal racism. That's always with us. But institutional racism,
like legal racism,
just
yeah.
erased. You know, I've seen all this stuff. I've never had to fight. I've never had to pick up a rifle. I've never had to do any of those things. And I'm so grateful. I'd be a jerk if I weren't an optimist.
And really, I think that was the contrast. Who are the people who are standing up? Are you standing up to cheer the Holocaust survivor and the American soldier who liberated him? Or are you standing up to cheer yourself for doing legitimately nothing?
For
doing
reaping the
nothing.
benefits.
For being born in the richest country in the history of mankind where nobody stood in your way and where you were feted for precisely the reasons that you're complaining about, where all of the attention that you're getting is based upon the intersectional identity you say is oppressing you. Right? Nobody would pay attention to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Rashida Tlaib or any of the fresh faces of the Democratic Party were they not members of minority intersectional groups. That is why they are receiving this attention. They're brand new Democratic Congress people who are white folks and they're not receiving that attention. Why?
Right.
Because in this country right now, we are so sensitive to the fact that we have had a terrible history with a lot of various groups. And now we're bending over backward to say that we're excited, that this is a sign that we've welcomed everybody in. And instead of people saying, you know what, that's amazing, what an incredible country, their answer is, yeah, you know, F this country. This country is a terrible place, and it continues to be a terrible place, and we have to make the country not a terrible place by abandoning the central values that allowed me to be a 29-year-old bartender from Queens who becomes the most celebrated congressperson in America.
We're a country where no one loses their job on the basis of their race, where no one loses their job on the basis of their religion, where no one loses their job on the basis of their gender, and where, in fact, a person is immeasurably more likely to get a job on the basis of their gender, get a job on the basis of their...
Only if you're licensed by the Texas State Bar. I believe that's how you really...
But it is a good reminder. And again, it's the contrast that's the reminder. Right? If Trump had just said this in the Oval Office, we all would have been like, all right. But the fact that he was contrasting that with these Democrats who are playing victim at a time when they are not the victims. They are not the victims.
Yeah.
And you know what? There's this concept in the military, obviously, of stolen valor. People who pretend that they were members in service when they were not. And then they are stealing the valor of people who actually went and fought and suffered and died and were wounded.
Like they were working on refrigerators while they were in the Army during the 1970s and not in Vietnam being shot at.
There is a level
for example.
There is a level of stolen societal valor that is taking place right now
it's a really
by a
good
group
point,
of people
Ben.
in the United States who say that they are victims of a system that has not only not made them victims, but has made them famous, in many cases rich, and has made them prominent, and has made them powerful. And they are claiming victimhood on the level of the people who actually were victims, who are up there sitting in the rafters. And by the way, not all of whom are Republicans. Right? I mean, people like John Lewis, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar did not suffer. John Lewis suffered, okay? So if you want to stand there and say thank you to John Lewis, I'm with you, and I disagree with John Lewis about nearly everything.
Right.
But if you're going to pretend that the young, fresh faces of the Democratic Party are somehow, that they've overcome a thing, you're going to have to explain to me what they overcame. Like, really, I want to know. What did they overcome?
But it also leaves out what you're not thinking about when you're thinking about the injustices of the past. And we all agree that there were injustices in the past. There's no question about it. But when you're thinking about those, you're not thinking about what you can contribute to the future. And I say this to college kids, and I'll say like the black kids, I'll say, you know, people of your color were attacked by dogs in my lifetime, hosed in my lifetime by the police. The police attacked them. you shouldn't be thinking about that because that's not going to happen to you. You should be thinking about, can I get to Mars? Can I cure cancer? Can I do the next big thing? Because once you're mired in that, once you have to pretend, that idea about stolen valor is so true. Once you have to pretend that you're a victim, you can't concentrate on what you can contribute. How can you can make the next generation great?
And if you're going to pay attention to that, pay attention to pay homage to the people who made those policemen stop doing that.
Yep.
And also the people who were marching and who were actually sicked on, the dogs were sicked upon.
Yeah.
I mean, to suggest that you are the equivalent, we are the new civil rights movement, we are the new civil rights marchers, we are the new anything. You're not the new anything. You're not the new anything.
Right.
Because the truth is, the worst thing that you have going for you is some people disagree with you sometimes. That's the worst thing happening to you, is that you say dumb things and people criticize you on Twitter for saying a dumb thing.
And then they get banned.
And then
they get banned.
Right, and then they get banned, or you criticize the press for supposedly lying about you and they're not lying about you, and then they praise you for it. A real rough life you lead. I mean, that's the part that really is, it is upsetting and it's galling. And if Democrats keep doing this routine, and Trump speaks like he spoke tonight, they're going to have a lot more trouble in 2020 than they think they're going to have.
And you're so right about the fact that if he could be that guy all the time, he would be up at 60%, his approval. I mean, he's, the thing that always drives me crazy about him is, on paper, he's doing a good job. The country is doing well. We're at peace. We're prosperous. He's doing fine, but he is that person.
And
The power of perception, though, is what allows all of this to flourish. And
it's true.
Every piece of what we're talking about right now is rooted in perception. And one thing the president didn't talk about during his speech tonight, which I think was wise of him, he didn't get into his whole enemy of the people media thing.
Right.
Yeah, that was not the time.
Let's us get into it for him. Everything we're talking about here is maintained on the sort of scaffolding of the media and academia, which it requires their full-time effort to prop up these false perceptions and have people be able to live in them as though they were true.
Yeah. Yeah, and it has a double effect because, we see the effect. We see that the people strike back. We see that the people don't always listen to them. But if you're in Washington and you're there every day and you're governing, it's a cloud that surrounds you. And we sometimes wonder, why don't Republicans have any guts? Why don't they stand up here? Why don't they stand up there? It's because they are living in this miasma of press perception that they think is reality, and they don't get out enough to see the people who don't care as much as they do, and in fact as we do. These guys have power because they have power over the people who have power over us.
What do we do about the fact? So the media is what the media is. We challenge them on free market grounds. We are not anywhere near as powerful as the combined power of the mainstream press, obviously, but at least there's room on the internet, there's room on talk radio, there's room in podcasting for conservative voices to get out. What do we do about to me, the bigger long-term problem, which is academia, where our tax dollars are actively contributing? It's not a market situation. We are, through coercion, being forced to pay for practically every young person in this country to be inundated with this view that they are either victims or oppressors, basically on the basis of nothing other than their birth.
I have to tell you, I was back at Yale over the weekend for a reunion. And
you meet any of your kids there?
No, I was back there, and we were talking about the problem of academia, higher education, that even at Yale or Harvard or wherever, top schools in the country, it has been hollowed out and just filled in with indoctrination.
Perhaps especially
there. Yale is probably leading the charge. And we were debating some of these proposals, taxing the endowments, pulling funding, this, that, and the other thing. I have a sentimental attachment to my alma mater. Absent that, I am basically willing to pull the plug on all of these institutions. I think it's basically unsalvageable. The way that the system is set up, the administrators, the ever-multiplying administrators, the deans, the deputy assistant, deputy inclusion dean, all the deans kicking you out of visiting schools. I'm very offended because they don't kick me out of visiting schools. But all of those places, to say nothing of the faculty, to say nothing of the students, the craziest people of all, often, of a minority of students, but a vocal leftist minority of students. I think it's basically unsalvageable if we keep playing by these same rules. We've done a great job at creating think tanks. We've done a great job at new media, obviously. But that I don't think is enough. And I think we need a stronger, a more robust solution to higher education.
So I do think that there are a couple of possibilities that will crop up in the near future. One is the possibility of online education, meaning that spending $100,000 to go to one of these colleges when you could spend $100 to get the same courses. If we can get accreditation for these things, great, right? And I think that there's a case to be made that if you started in a real online university in which people can pay to get in, and then they're weeded out on the basis of their performance in the classroom. And I mean, this is the way it used to be at a lot of the top law schools. It was not that they actually admitted you on the basis of past performance. They basically let everyone in, and then they weeded people out as they performed. That would be one possibility, and I think that we should be making moves in that direction as a movement and as a people. The other possibility is that conservative employers need to stop credentialing. We need to start going into high schools and recruiting people for internships, and then saying, come work, come learn our business, and you'll be a good employee in a year and a half, and you saved on college, and then you can work here, and then you have a work record. And once you have a work record, you can move place to place. Because a poli-sci degree from UCLA, which is what I have, I learned nothing with my poli-sci degree at UCLA. Neither does any poli-sci major in America.
Right.
Okay? They are full of it. All it is credentialing so you can go to law school.
I think we also have to revise the think tank system that conservatives created basically to oppose universities. They are research centers, but they are all based on non-capitalist means of funding. So they all have these old funders who do not know they have no idea what we're doing. They think a really strong editorial in the Wall Street Journal is an incredible weapon. If you go in there and say, I can make you a video that'll reach 1 million people. They have a video? What's a video? I've never heard of it. And they need to be more active. What YAF is doing when they send all of us out to colleges, that is actually taking action. But when you just sit and write articles, it does contribute to knowledge and it contributes to conservative research, but they're not reaching out to the people.
But again, my real concern is we pay for these universities to do the work that they do, and even, listen, the most rabid right winger will send their kid to these schools to get liberal arts degrees.
Yeah.
And pat themselves on the back for doing it. I'm so proud of you, honey, that you went to a school and got a degree in absolutely nothing.
But
why? Because there is still a false perception of the value of these educations that we buy into. And we all agree, if you're going to be an art surgeon, you got to go to school. But there is almost, if a liberal arts bachelor's degree qualifies you for a job, that is not a job.
But I will.
I'm
a strong defender of liberal education, actual liberal education. Yeah. I love it helps us make sense of our freedom. That's what we do.
Then let's not pretend that that's what a.
But that's the issue. You
is.
can now graduate from Yale with honors in English and never read Shakespeare or Chaucer.
Yeah, so that's not a liberal.
That is not a liberal education.
That's not an.
Well, I mean, one of the things that actually has to happen just on a legal level is that we have to get rid of regulations that prevent people from going into particular industries. So, for example, California actually has it right. You do not have to go to an accredited law school in order to take the bar. So that's good. But most states, you have to go to an accredited law school in order to take a bar. Well, who does the accrediting? Well, it's an agency of the government that does the accrediting. So you have a corrupt system where Democrats in the legislature decide what the accreditation standards are, and they cram that down on a bunch of universities who are happy to do it because they get to upcharge the students for the payment, and so they restrict it's a bottleneck in terms of who can actually join particular careers. Getting rid of credentialing is this is what Peter Thiel is working on, right? Getting rid of credentialing is the single best way to get rid of the influence of academia on our lives. And that's a long-term project. That's not something that's going to happen.
But it is what Jeremy is talking about.
And get rid of the stigma around not going to college.
But that's going to happen when you actually have conservatives who, I have been told, run major businesses. Start actually hiring people without reference to the idea that if you went to Yale, you must be smarter than a guy who went to Hillsdale College because Yale requires a higher SAT.
It is one of the first things that I did when we started this company and we started having to hire people who weren't my immediate friends.
It was like yesterday, I think.
Just a few days ago. They put together our first sort of job postings, and they brought them in for me to see, and they all said under the job requirements must have a bachelor's degree or higher. And I said, you cannot put that in there. And they said, well, why? Everybody does this. I said, yes, but I can't live with myself as someone who did not go to college if I pretend that you have to have gone to college in order to work at this company. It is simply untrue.
And most CEOs don't go to the top schools. They don't go to the Ivy Leagues. It's not a requirement. And all these guys who invented the computer revolution dropped out, half of them. I think it's obvious. It's credentialing. It's exactly what you say, and it's why we're proud. It's why I'm proud when my son went to Yale. Even though, it's funny. I feel like you and my son went to Yale in the last gasp.
We did. It was Yale's the last couple of years, really.
And yet it is now. It's the Men in Black scenario. If you all remember remember that movie where the alien comes, eats the guy, and then puts on his body as clothing? That's what the left does. They did it to the New York Times. New York Times is not a great newspaper anymore. It just has the body of a great newspaper with this alien philosophy inside. Yale is the same way. Most of our colleges are the same way. They do not deserve the credit and the status that they have.
How do we get Donald Trump? How do we get Ted Cruz? I mean, it is a challenge that so many of our elected officials, I mean, that is one thing an elite education does afford you a certain amount of networking.
Open stores.
Open stores.
That's the credential.
How do we get these guys to actually talk about this kind of issue? Because at the end of the day, we actually can't win the future in a world where you can't spend 25 years training kids to think one way and then go, well, how do we win them?
You have to build the institutions and then ask people to sign on to them. You can't ask Trump or Cruz to do the heavy lifting.
Yes, that's right.
You can have them endorse programs that already exist and say, this is a great career path. Like you see this right now, there's a big move for trade schools. Right? The big move for trade schools is specifically because there are a surplus of jobs in certain areas of the country, in fracking and the Midwest, where you actually just go to trade school and you can make $100,000 a year if you're willing to move to Wyoming or something. And so people are recommending that now. People are starting to say, go to trade school. Don't get that liberal arts degree. Maybe you think about that. The problem is right now the Democrats are offering you free money and telling you that at the end of that rainbow, there is going to be a pot of gold. That you take all the free money and then after you go to college, you'll make $100,000 a year no matter what you do. That's not actually true. We actually have to start also pushing, just in terms of messaging, the fact that high-achieving high school graduates do better than low-achieving college graduates, which is also financially true. If you're again, you don't have to have a college degree. The college degree, especially in liberal arts, as we've always talked about, is basically a substitute for an IQ test. It's just a filtering system. That's all it is. Like when we look at somebody's bachelor's degree, we don't know what they actually learned in college. We just know that if you went to UCLA, we can probably assume you're smarter than somebody who went to CSUN or something.
The sad thing, by the way, about the liberal arts is there is a liberal arts curriculum that needs to be touched, that needs to be taught, that I was taught. I went to Berkeley, one of the...
But you know what? It is being taught, but it's being taught informally in other settings, meaning the Great Courses Plus, for example.
Right.
They're teaching these
program,
things.
Hudson program.
Right, Hillsdale has courses that they put out for free.
Absolutely.
And we buy these courses, right, as laymen because we're interested in them. Like I wrote an entire book just now on pop philosophy, basically. That's basically me doing reading outside of school, right? I didn't read any of that stuff when I was an undergrad. That was me deciding I wanted to delve into it on my own. And we're fully capable of doing that stuff. The problem is when we linked the idea of a college degree with an automatic income, which is a false statement. I mean, if you went and you studied classics at Yale, there is no pot of gold at the end of that rainbow for you unless you're going to be a professor in classics at Yale, right? That is the pot of gold.
This is the big issue. I don't think it's up to Trump and Cruz and those guys. I think it's up to you guys. I think it's up to conservative businessmen, because the notion that a liberal arts education prepares you for a job is simply false. People used to ask what I majored in. I said history and Italian literature. They said, well, that's not useful. And I would joke about it. Liberal arts education is specifically not useful. Actually, if it is useful, it's not a liberal arts education. You're supposed to go, you learn how to think about history for 4 years, and then if you are ready to do a job, that is a coincidence. Or you go to law school or you do something else. But we've created this ridiculous idea that studying Shakespeare for 4 years prepares you to be an analyst in some bank or something like that. It really doesn't do that. And I think it's not up to the politicians. It's really up to conservative businessmen to realize, hey, maybe a guy who has a liberal education could be prepared for a job, but that has absolutely no connection.
I think we just came up with our next business idea, so we better shut this down.
Cut the feed.
I do want to go to some of our Daily Wire subscribers because they keep the lights on and keep us in business, and Elisha has been fielding some questions. Elisha, are you with us?
Yeah, we do have some questions, but first we need to get to those poll results from that Facebook poll that everybody got to vote in, not just subscribers, so that's really cool. The question was, is the State of the Union speech necessary? Our answers were absolutely, please no, it is the bedrock of society, and I wonder if the game is on. I'm not a sports person, but I thought after the Super Bowl, all sports ended for another year. Anyway, here's our results. Apparently, 83% of our Daily Wire fans think that absolutely the State of the Union is necessary. Sorry, Ben.
I'm shocked that so many people I think so highly of could be so wrong.
Well, we should retake that poll when a Democrat is president, because I have a feeling that things will reverse immediately to the other side. It was a good, useful State of the Union address.
Listen, the State of the Union address is a grand opportunity for the sitting president. It's an opportunity that they can either take advantage of or choke and botch dramatically. But it's useful for the president, which is why if your party's in power, you tend to like it.
Yeah, exactly.
You tend to like the
especially
address.
for Trump, who doesn't get any media love at all. He just goes over their heads with this.
That's right. Yeah. What's next, Alicia?
So Please No got 9%. It Is the Bedrock of Our Society got 3%. And I Wonder If the Game Is On got 5%. There's those results on your screen. This comes from subscriber Jeremy.
Let me say this. If that game was still going,
Yeah, the State of the Union trumps it.
It was better. Yeah, it was actually more exciting. Yeah.
I am not a sports ball person, but I would strongly agree. This question comes from a subscriber named Jeremy, not God King Jeremy, but subscriber Jeremy, who says, do you think that the Dems really believe half of the intersectional things they say? Or do you think that they are just saying them to get votes?
Michael, what do you think?
I do think that they actually do buy into the intersectional politics. I think it has been given to them through osmosis and training from kindergarten until college. And they really do believe this narrative that women are incredibly oppressed. I see it just in the millennial generation. I think even some conservative millennials have an inkling that this is true. And I don't think it's just cynical. I think a little learning is a dangerous thing. Mm-hmm. So they learn about some of the historical exclusions of blacks in the 19th and 20th century after the freedom from slavery. They learn about some of those things, and they don't learn about the tradition. They don't learn about the rest of the tradition. They really do buy boilerplate Marxism. They don't realize that there are other views of the world. You don't learn about other political philosophies. You don't learn about your own tradition. And so when you hear, hey, hey, ho, ho, Western civ has got to go, that really did sever a lot of education about our own history, and now they're just left with this bland ideology. Could they defend why it exists? Probably not, but it doesn't matter because, unfortunately for them, their feelings don't care about the facts.
It's an interesting point that you raised that even conservative millennials, there is this streak of really sort of left-wing feminism among conservative women that I pick up on quite often, which I'm sure if I were paying more attention in other places, I would detect the same thing on other intersectional issues. What is that, Ben?
So I think that there's basically two groups of people. I don't think either of these groups of people are the cynical manipulators who just figure, I'm going to tout the virtues of intersectionality for political gain. I think that that's very rare. I think that there may be a few people who are like that. I think most of them actually believe the stuff that they're saying. I'll at least credit my opponents with sincerity. I do think that there is a large group of people who don't actually agree on a gut level with the intersectional philosophy, but also are sick of getting clubbed. They're just sick of getting hit. And you see it on college campuses a lot. And it's this feeling where if you proclaim, it's like a Maoist show trial. If you proclaim your privilege, then we let you go. So if you I agree with the intersectional identity politics, and then you proclaim that you are a privileged member of society, and they leave you alone. So, okay, we can all agree that just like most bad philosophies, intersectional philosophy starts on a couple of foundational principles that are actually correct and then proceeds to build an entire edifice of falsehood over those correct foundations. So foundation number one is that there's been historic victimization of minority groups in the United States, which of course is true. And foundation number two is that if you're a member of two victimized minority groups, sometimes you're more victimized than a person who's a member of one victimized minority group. So if you're a black woman, maybe you are worse off than a black man in a similar situation or a white woman in the same situation. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. But at least there's a plausible argument for it. And then on top of that, they build this idea that the entire hierarchy is corrupt, which is why the victimization itself has become so widespread and endemic to our society, and that the only way to fight back against that hierarchy is to maintain the group identities that were originally wrongfully thrust upon you from above. Right. This is the argument that Stacey Abrams makes in that foreign affairs piece I argued earlier, I mentioned earlier. Basically, what she says is that group identity was built by the white patriarchy, that there weren't black people and brown people and women. It was that there were a bunch of white men who othered a bunch of various groups. There's some truth to that, right?
I agree
Obviously, there's some truth
on the
to that.
racial
A lot of
side,
truth
not
to that.
on the sexual side, but on the racial side.
Right, on the racial side, that is obviously true. And then she says, well, if there's a policy that targets any of these groups, then they have to fight back qua group in order to overcome that. So if you are targeted as black folks and you fight back against a law that targets black folks, you obviously have to organize as a group of black folks. Now, that's about 3/4 true, but you do have to reach out beyond your immediate group in order to reach allies, right? The civil rights movement didn't just stop at black folks. The success of the civil rights movement was entirely dependent on reaching beyond black folks by invoking universal principles that should apply to everyone, which is why we celebrate Martin Luther King Day and not Malcolm X Day, right? So that's one of the great lies. But the biggest lie of all is the idea that now every policy that is disliked by Democrats is in fact an attack on a group. And therefore, we have to identify as groups in order to fight back against that policy. And that's where Stacey Abrams goes in that piece. She says, well, it used to be that there were laws that prevented black people from voting. So we had to organize as black people to fight back against the laws that prevented black people from voting. okay, I think everybody is basically fine with that and agrees with that. And we also agree that you have to invoke universal principles that broaden your group so that it's not just black folks arguing for their rights, it's also everybody arguing for black folks' rights. But then she says something different. Then she says, the problem is that we have reduced the definition of racism down to legal racism that can be touched. Racism exists everywhere. It's miasmatic. It's all over the place. And therefore, if you look at immigration policy, President Trump's immigration policy, there you also see racism. Or she actually mentions the anti-abortion law. She says the anti-abortion law targets minority women in particular because minority women have most of the abortions. And therefore, we have to mobilize as black women, as a group, because we are targeted in the same way black people were targeted by voting laws cracking down on blacks. That's fundamentally false. Anti-abortion law is not directed at black women. It is directed at saving the lives of children. So now you are justifying a group identity attack on everyone else in just the same way that white people were a group identity attacking everyone else. So you've flipped the entire script on its head on the basis of politics.
What you're describing, though, is you're describing and this happens all the time, you're describing an oppressed group adopting the values of the people who oppress them, which is satanic if you think about it. And what they should be saying is, yes, we have to gather together as blacks because you have put us in this situation. But we reach out to all of you who do not put us in this situation and say, we are human beings, not blacks. And that's where you have to be going. You have to not only oppose the people who oppress you, you have to oppose the values of the people who oppress you because that's what they're oppressing you with. And that is what the intersectionalism has failed to do.
We're not far off from Martin Luther King Jr. actually being a pariah because he is not an intersectional figure.
Well, they've already done this, right? I mean, so what they've done now is they say, yeah, Martin Luther King was great, but he was great for all the stuff you don't know about.
Right.
He's not great for the I Have a Dream speech. He's not great for the call for unity and treating people as individuals beyond race. He's not good for any of that stuff. What he's really good for is that he protested for economic justice during the garbage strike in Memphis, right? That's where he's really great. He's really great because he understood that you need a socialist superstructure of economics in order to achieve a post-racial society. They go to all the stuff that nobody...
Not for his bourgeois, white middle-class values that are...
Not the stuff we built a monument to him for, right?
Yeah,
it's exactly the same thing they do with Thomas Jefferson now, which is, oh, well, what we really should focus on with Jefferson is not the stuff that made him a hero. We should focus on all the other stuff, because that's more indicative of who he was as a person.
Yep.
Right? And so they've decided to deliberately read a counter history. It's the Howard Zinnification of American history.
Yeah. Alicia, let's hear from another one of our Daily Wire subscribers.
All right, Matt wants to know, what are some things that ordinary conservatives like him can do to influence the big power players in Washington, D.C. without resorting to the radical tactics of the left?
Andrew.
Well, I think the two things that I mean, obviously, there's all kinds of political action you can take, and I don't think you need me to describe the fact that you can call your congressman and get in touch with the people who are in government.
Try voting.
What's that?
Try
voting would be a big one, yeah. But I do think that too many people, especially the young, the question I get all the time is, how can I convince people this? How can I state this? And what they really mean is, how can I do it without consequence? And you can't. It requires courage, and it requires paying the penalty of social, approbation. Yeah, that you have to do it. You have to say the words. You have to behave in a certain way. It's no good, to me, it is no good to oppose feminism. I'm very much in favor of women's rights, but I'm very much against the philosophy of feminism. If you don't open the damn door for a lady, if you don't treat women as you feel women should be treated, if you are carrying the culture in your hands, the way you behave is a communication of culture, not just to your family, but to the people around you. And you have to be able to stand, as I have stood, and be yelled at by women for doing the things that you know are right, and be yelled at by your professor, and take a little bit of a lesser grade, take a little bit of a smaller audience, take some economic hits. You've got to be able to do it, or else they're going to win in the long run.
This is the gospel reading this week was about how a prophet doesn't have any honor in his own hometown. Yeah. And the real difference is, if a kid gets into college or whatever and he's kept quiet and he hasn't really said anything, that's great. A hometown kid makes good for him. The minute that he stands for something, people are going to start taking shots at him. That's not something to be feared. I mean, it's to be feared in that there will be consequences. That's what makes you a man. That's what makes you an adult. That's what makes you have integrity.
But I can't hear a guy dressed like that.
No, just a lot of integrity.
It's too much.
Jeremy, if you don't stand for bow ties, you'll fall for anything.
But, it's also true that I think that, since the company has gotten very large, and because, with added degrees of prominence, it's easy to talk about the sort of sacrifices that you have to make to stand for the right things. We're now in a time when people will deliberately take you out of context, deliberately malign your character, deliberately try to destroy you. So it's not just that you get to stand and then people attack you for the things that you're willing to stand and die for. It's that people will deliberately attempt to destroy you for things that you've never said, that you've never even thought.
I agree with you.
And it's it's a dangerous area. I mean, you have to decide whether it's an area you want to go into. I understand people who don't want to go into this fight. I mean, so it makes it. This isn't a rip on anything anybody else was saying. I obviously agree. We're all in the same business, but it is true that you have to consider the sacrifice on the level that the sacrifice is going to have to be made.
Yep.
And that is that your life becomes, to a certain extent, not your own. Basically, you wake up in fear every day that somebody is going. I mean, like, I know this sounds a little self-centered, but it's true. I mean, we're at the point now where I wake up in fear that somebody is going to deliberately take something that I've written 10 years ago, one sentence out of context, and then it will blow up before I have a chance to respond to it on Twitter.
I can't go with you on this. I mean, I feel I'm not going to be judged by the killers of babies. I'm not going to be judged by the people who want socialism in this country. And they can take me out of context. And look, I've lost millions of dollars, Ben. I'm willing to go there.
And that's something that you're willing to do. It's something I'm willing to do too. But it is something that you have to steel yourself for.
Yes.
And you have to do it. And you have to do it on a routine basis. And you also have to make yourself harder in a lot of ways that are unpleasant for a good person. Because as a good person, you spend a lot of time thinking about all the things that you've done wrong. If you're a good person, you try to spend, when somebody criticizes you, your first reaction is that true? Maybe it's true.
Yeah, of course.
And maybe I should, and there comes a point where you do have to turn into Andrew Breitbart, and it's just like, screw it.
But I think for the average person, maybe they're watching this show and they're wondering how they can get involved. And my answer isn't start a multi-million-dollar media company. Although, if you got that in you, do it. But a better piece of advice, I think, it isn't about what you should do, it's about what you should not do. If everyone would just stop with the Victorian era moralizing lack of grace culture that we live. The first novel written in America is The Scarlet Letter. And we have really come full circle now, where a person makes a mistake or doesn't make a mistake somewhere in their life. They at a minimum, they run afoul of the prevailing virtue of society, and everyone jumps on the bandwagon to destroy this person. And I remember thinking this. I have a friend who, his father was a pastor, and this was in the 90s. He had to get up on the stage at the church and confess in front of 300 people that he had been looking at pornography. Now, this was back when the internet was brand new, and so, back then it wasn't just like, you wouldn't, like now you walk through 7-Eleven, you see a little 6-year-old on their smartphone, you're like, oh, cool, they're probably playing a war. Oh, dear God. This was back when, people had rolled up magazines hidden from their mom, right? And his mom had found his rolled up magazine and made such a federal case out of this, because really a lot of these problems started in the church, where masculinity just became the only sin that the church cared about. Boyhood became the only sin that, and that's not to say looking at porn is good. It's just to say it isn't the highest evil ever conceived of by anyone, which is what it became, I think, when the church really lost masculinity.
I don't think in the Dante scheme of it, like at the very bottom is a nudie magazine. I don't.
So this kid had to get up, 19 years old, in front of 300 people in his church and confess that he had looked at pornography. And all I thought was, what he should have said is, I'm so sorry, it's obviously not a good thing. I'm embarrassed that my mom found this magazine. I shouldn't have done it. And I'm just asking, by show of hands, who's been there? And I actually think what would have happened is every man in the audience would have started to raise their hand, and every wife would have gone, no.
Right.
You don't look at pornography. And he would have been like, And then the next thing, but instead, all of those grown adult men sat there like cowards and let this guy take this hit. And we do the same thing when a teenage girl gets pregnant. Teenage girl gets pregnant, and we, the party of life, shake our heads, humiliation. Her mother should be disappointed. We don't want our kids talking to her, and then the question I want to say is, show of hands, how many people had sex before they were married? Even once, you guys. And not by your exaggerated definitions of what is and what ain't.
It depends on what the definition.
Right. Who's dodged a bullet in their day? But we all live in this kind of common grace where the truth is the majority of our bad behaviors don't cause the worst possible consequence. But we all participate in the prudish stoning and shunning of every person who gets caught doing things that we ourselves have done.
What's worse is that when people try to redeem themselves, then we
is
still
right.
go after them. So,
And-
we now live in a world where that guy would get up and he would do the confession.
And it wouldn't
then
be enough.
It wouldn't be enough. People would come up to him afterwards and say, well, why'd you do it in the first place?
Yeah.
Why'd you do it in the first place?
And it's the same. I always say that.
I'm not saying that we can't stand for values.
No,
but-
of course not. Of course not. But it's the same. I always say about racists is they're not wrong about the other guy. They're wrong about themselves. The other
Yes.
guy is as bad as they think, but they're worse. They're just as bad. It's this. And the left is the same way. And I think the right is picking it up now. Is this idea? I have hardly seen a guy. I mean, look, there are guys who are serial killers and all that. Yeah, they're worse than me. Most of these people that are being attacked, I've done things that I'm ashamed of. Who on earth has not? And when you're shouting at somebody, when you're shouting them down, you're basically virtue signaling. You're basically saying, it's not me, it is. And if we don't get that back, that idea of original sin,
That's right.
that the guy sitting next to you is a sinner, and the guy he's sitting next to also a sinner, we'll never be able to talk.
And if we all jump on the bandwagons of crucifying the people who get caught while pretending that the fact that we didn't get caught
That's right.
makes us virtuous.
It's a
You
pagan
can't live in a
notion of
world
sin.
where Liam Neeson confesses that he had a horrible thought 40 years ago. He confesses it as a bad thing,
A thought.
a thought.
Yeah.
And everyone decides that the conclusion of that is that he should be destroyed.
Well, it is a pagan version of sin. So
Yes,
the religious
that's
version
right.
of sin is that we all sin. It's part of human nature. It's what we do. God built us that way, and it's our job to try and overcome that, but we are inevitably going to fail.
Correct.
And then when we fail, then we seek God's grace and his mercy in that sin, and that's what we call redemption, which is the core story of every religious experience that virtually anyone has ever had, from Yom Kippur to Augustine, right? I mean, this is the common religious tradition.
Right.
The pagan version of sin is you sinned, you will be punished, no mercy. It doesn't matter what you do afterward.
Right.
There is no redemption. You can't undo a sin. It's already done. So what exactly are you going to do about it? And this has led to a bizarre situation where not only do we destroy people for sins of which they have repented or thoughts of which they have repented, we've made it impossible for you to even acknowledge the sin, because if we're going to destroy you for acknowledging a sin, you may as well double down.
Right.
So being
That's right.
shameless and being a jerk is actually an asset in the area of public life. If you don't care what anybody thinks, and if you don't care that you've sinned, and if you're willing to lie or to just say you didn't do it, then you actually have an advantage in politics, because brazening it out is significantly better than just acknowledging that you made a mistake and getting over it. What's even weirder, and this just occurred to me, I don't know if you guys saw Cory Booker's disgusting display today in the Judiciary Committee.
I did not see it.
It was also humiliating for him.
Yeah, well, there was the humiliating point where he tried to ask Naomi Rao, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals nominee, whether she had ever had an LGBTQ clerk, to which she informed him, I've never been a judge before.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I did see that.
clerks.
That was
But
great,
there
yeah.
was also a moment, a big exchange, where he basically asked her, do you believe that homosexual activity is a sin? And she said, why is this relevant? I'm a judge. That's not my, why are my personal religious viewpoints relevant to my interpretation of the law? And he said, yeah, but do you think it's a sin? Do you think it's a sin if two men get married? Do you think it's a sin? And she kept saying, this is not an appropriate question, right? This is
Yeah.
we have a law in this country, in the Constitution, that you cannot have a religious test for higher office. This is absurd. But the reason that Booker was doing that is because he has that same pagan notion of sin, which means that the pagan notion of sin is that if you commit a sin, then you will inevitably be punished by the person who finds out about the sin. So he thinks that Naomi Rao's version of sin is the same as Cory Booker's version of sin. So he thinks that
That's a really good
he
point,
thinks that Naomi Rao's version of sin is she thinks that homosexual activity is a sin. Now, most traditionally religious people who read the Bible believe homosexual activity is a sin. That doesn't mean that we don't think a lot of things are sins, or that you can repent of that sin, or that you can sin and still be a human being and operate in the good graces of society, or that the government should get involved. Right? There are all sorts.
But Cory Booker actually doesn't think
But Cory
that.
Booker doesn't think that. Cory Booker thinks that if you sin, you go down and you pay the price, and it's my job to make you go down and pay the price. So Cory Booker's version of sin is a Christian baker who won't serve a same-sex wedding, right? And that person must pay. That person must be paid to pay by the government. And so he thinks the same thing about religious people. He thinks religious people want to actually target people who believe that religious people who believe that homosexual activity is a sin want to go into the bedroom and somehow prosecute or persecute people who are gay, which is eminently untrue.
If the things that happened on Twitter happened in physical life, and you saw mobs moving from place to place, hunting people down, dragging them out of their houses, beating them to death, which is essentially what they're doing, you would notice, you would know the horror of it. You would understand the horror. Might not stop it from happening, but at least we would be able to see what it really is.
Twitter, because it's a gathering place, but it's not a gathering place with a purpose. Like normally, in order for mobs to form, they actually have to have a common purpose. But Twitter is legitimately a mob without a purpose, right? And mob mentality is really dangerous. So all it takes is one guy going over there, and everybody just rushes over there.
Look at that smoking high school kid.
Yeah, you
Like
don't see
usually
the
you have a
blood,
purpose, and it's like, oh well, a bad thing happened. Let's get the mob together and go lynch somebody, right? And that's bad enough.
I got into a conversation on Twitter just last night about whether or not Twitter is the real world, where a pal of ours said, Twitter is the real world, and people need to treat people on Twitter like they're real people. And everybody's, oh yeah, that's beautiful. We all need to be better to each other. And I was like, no, I don't agree with this. And I said, screech. You heard the record scratch. What do you mean it's not the real world? And I said, well, it isn't the real world because more than 50% of people on Twitter write under pseudonyms. Anonymity does not breed authenticity. And in the real world, our relationships typically form around common circumstances. But on Twitter, they only form over a common reaction to content.
Some abstract.
Yeah, we like the same thing, therefore we are on the same side. We don't know each other, so we have no accountability to each other or to the people we're going to attack. And so it all becomes this sort of purity, right? It all is this sort of...
And it's always, that's why people are always taken aback when suddenly people are polite to each other on Twitter.
Yeah.
Because they understand it's all performative, right? Twitter is just performative. You're doing it in public. Like today I had an exchange with Pete Buttigieg, who's the mayor of South Bend, who's trying to run for president on the Democratic side. Yeah. So I tweeted something out about how there's an NBC News article that suggested in the title, basically, that an ice shelf was about to collapse and inundate all the coastal cities in the world with 2 feet of water. And I just pointed out that not in the headline and not in the subheadline did it say, based on a computer model, this might happen in 50 to 100 years. So I pointed this out and the left went crazy because am I suggesting we shouldn't do anything about global warming? And no, I'm not. I'm just saying like you might want to say in the headline that in 50 to 100 years this might be a problem according to a computer model that has not yet been proved to be accurate, right?
Yeah,
there are a few caveats here.
If there was a headline that said nuclear weapons set to go off in downtown Manhattan, and then in paragraph 7, it says 100 years from now, you'd go, oh, we may be able to do something about that.
Right, exactly. And so Pete Buttigieg, wrote back to me, and he was kind of mocking, and I said, he said something like, well, this is, I've never seen such, unwillingness to consider the needs of the next generation. I said, now do the national debt. And he wrote back, well, you first. And then I actually started a conversation with him where I was like, okay, fine, well, let's restructure our entitlements. And it started going back and forth. And finally I said, listen, why don't you just come on our Sunday special?
Yeah, I saw that.
Stop by. We'll do an hour. We'll actually have a and he said, you know what, that actually sounds great because Twitter kind of sucks. And it's like, well, that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, because Louis C.K. does a great routine. I know we're not allowed to mention Louis
No,
C.K.
I love the
now.
guy.
I mean, by the way,
He's dead.
Still the most talented comedian of the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Definitely at least number 2.
So Louis C.K. Does this routine where he talks about how we act when we're in our car by ourselves.
Yes, I know.
Right, where when you're driving and somebody cuts you off in traffic, you just start mother effing them, right? You start yelling at them and screaming at them. Yeah, go die, you piece of... And he says, would you ever do that in an elevator? Like someone bumped you in an elevator, you just turn to them and say, go die, right? You would never do that. We act like we're in our cars alone on Twitter.
Yeah.
And that's
the physical presence
ugly
means
stuff.
everything. Physical presence, looking the guy in the eye, yeah.
Or even a phone presence, even
Yeah.
like having a
Yep.
one-on-one relationship with somebody.
Let's use a little bit of the time that we have left to talk to a few more subscribers. I often regret that we don't get enough subscriber questions in on the show since, as I've said many times, they pay us. And it's not just because I'm a good capitalist. Like philosophically, I support the fact that they engage in trade. But that's not why I love them so much. I love them because that money goes to me.
Directly to me. It's much
It goes
closer.
to us. Yeah, so for that reason, we should answer more of their questions. Elisha, do you have a few for us?
Absolutely. Tom says, gentlemen, and Michael, we say that politics is downstream of culture, but I'm seeing the distance between the two shrinking. Do you see this as well, or do I just watch the Daily Wire too much?
I couldn't hear the question.
Oh, shoot, the question is, you often say politics is downstream of culture, but it seems to me that the divide is shrinking. And do you see that as being true?
Well, politics has become a real form of entertainment. This is not the first time this has happened in American society. Certainly in the 19th century, there were a lot of huge political speeches, and it was a form of entertainment as well. I mean, it remains true. Reality reasserts itself that in a properly aligned society, politics is downstream of culture. Culture is downstream of religion. It's etymologically related to cult. What a culture worships defines that culture. And in inverted societies, in inverted views of the world, like we see increasingly on the left, that goes exactly in the other direction. So politics defines everything. It defines your culture, it defines what you do, your recreation, and it defines what amounts to your religious faith, which is why you see, especially during the Trump era, so many left-wingers ending friendships with right-wingers, not just on social media, but in real media, in the real air, in real life, because you've violated that which is sacred to them, which is their politics.
Well, I think that, quick distinction. So I think that in the 19th century, sometimes entertainment took the form of politics. Today, politics takes the form of entertainment. In other words, people had to be entertained by something, but it didn't fundamentally change the nature of politics, meaning that people would go and watch a 2-hour debate between Lincoln and Douglas, right?
Yeah.
And today, people will watch a 30-second clip of AOC owning somebody, or me owning somebody for that matter, right? I mean, that's what people do. So politics has actually been shaped to meet the memery of the entertainment world. And so, while I do think that politics was downstream from culture, and now we're seeing a merging of the two. I mean, President Trump is a reality TV star, right? I mean, and the next president will presumably be a new form of reality TV star, as Barack Obama was. With all of that said, the part that's dangerous to me is that politics itself has taken the form of entertainment, as opposed to the way it used to be, which was politics remained its own form. It's just people were entertained by it.
Right.
Now it's that we view a YouTube clip of a cat falling off a tile in the same way that we view a piece of political commentary. I saw this last week. Noah Rothman did a segment on MSNBC about his new book Unjust, which is quite good, about intersectionality. And somebody cut a 2-minute clip in which it doesn't show him talking at all. It's just somebody responding to a claim that we don't know Noah made about how he doesn't understand intersectionality, blah, blah, blah. This thing that was retweeted by everyone on the left. This was and Noah was like, you might want to watch the next 30 seconds where I respond to that, so you know. But it was like, no, Noah Rothman owned. Because we watch WWE in the same way we watch politics now. So the actual form of politics has changed, and that I think is pretty dark.
There was something, too, which speaks to what Jeremy was saying about perception, is that because the arts are monopolized by the left, they've basically dictated what can be in our entertainment. It's absurd to me.
They set the Overton window?
Yeah, exactly. It's absurd to me that every single late-night comedian is anti-Trump. Everyone, not one is going to come on and say, oh, yeah, I like Trump, or Nancy Pelosi is also silly. In the day when Charlton Heston, the great Hollywood conservative, and Gregory Peck, the great Hollywood liberal, could be good friends and could both represent the kinds of American heroes that we all respected. That was a different day.
Well,
now,
at the very least, I mean, Jay Leno, you didn't really know his politics. We sort of figured maybe he was a moderate Republican, maybe.
Yeah.
Johnny Carson, who was a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat, you had no idea what his politics were. Now you have Stephen Colbert basically filleting Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer on air.
Yeah,
I mean,
and embarrassingly, because he knows nothing about politics. I mean, he'll have some hack Democrat on and treat her like she's
It's also just bad.
It's bad. It's not
just
funny.
Bad stuff. I mean, it's like if you. The new definition of comedy is just sucking radical.
I would rather have
because actual comedy is immoral, according to the new religious virtue system of the puritanical left.
Yeah.
Okay, can we do another question?
You want to?
Yeah, let's do it.
One more question.
One more question.
We do have more questions, and your statement just then reminds me of what my mom always said. Behind every joke, there's a hint of truth, and as we know, people on the left just don't like the truth, so they won't laugh at it. Donald says, hey guys, with Cory Booker's prejudicial questions to judge candidate Rao, why doesn't McConnell remove him from the Judiciary Committee?
Well, I mean, I think that the restrictions on removing people from the Judiciary Committee are pretty strict. It's difficult to just censure somebody. Also, if I'm a Republican, I want Cory Booker saying that kind of stuff. Like, I want Cory Booker out there every single day being the doof that he is.
Tears of rage.
With his weird fingers and googly eyes doing his I am Spartacus routine. Well, what I love about Cory Booker the most, honestly, is it's like, you guys have any watches where you actually, the face isn't on the watch? You can see the gears turning underneath the watch. Yeah. Cory Booker is that, but a human. Right? You can see every political calculation happening in real time. It's like, if I turn this little gear right here, it turns the big gear, and the big gear is where I'm popular. And so he does this with everything, right? Everything has to be rehearsed 1,000 times, like, and it's so over the top. He chews the scenery like no one I've ever seen. I mean, the guy is he's the Nicolas Cage of politics. he did this routine today where Ted Cruz responded to him after he did this religious attack on Rao, and Cruz said exactly what is true. Right? Ted said, well, this is a religious attack, what you just did. And Booker says, Senator, you and I are friends, and since we're friends, you know that I would die to protect someone else's religious freedom. And I just thought to myself, I mean, slow wind up for the middle finger, my friend, because you have got to be kidding me. Like, you legitimately just said that this woman should not be able to sit on a federal court because you disagree about her private religious views. And then you're saying you would die for her religious freedom? And I'm going to go with I don't believe you. So getting Cory Booker out, no, more Cory Booker, lots of Cory Booker. Make Cory Booker the nominee, more Cory Booker.
So Alicia and all of our Daily Wire subscribers, thank you guys for the questions. and for making it possible for us to do what we do. I have one last question.
Hey. Before you get to this, we've made it through like 2.5, 3 hours right now. It's this man's birthday.
Yeah.
It's not the big birthday. It's not 41, but it is your 40th birthday, and that's a big deal too.
Another year closer to death.
I think we have to celebrate that in some way. We need maybe just a rendition of Happy Birthday.
Did you guys get me a blue check mark?
We finally got you a flaming blue check mark. Can we sing a round of Happy
Absolutely,
Birthday?
absolutely.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, dear God King. Happy birthday to you.
You guys. They wouldn't have done that for Trump.
All right.
You all get to eat this. You all get to eat this now, knowing that some of my spittle is on it.
Oh, perfect.
It is the weirdest tradition, isn't it? We all.
blow
Send that in to 23andMe. You can find out whether you're more Native American than Elizabeth Warren.
I don't need 23andMe to answer that question.
Jeremy, I'm going to let you cut it.
Well, thank you.
I'll let you cut it while we cut the show.
And I will, as I prepare everyone a nice slice of this beautiful birthday cake, which appropriately has the lowercase g, lowercase k. I will ask my final question, which is, did tonight help the president?
Yeah, it definitely helped him. I mean, the question is how much, the question is how much play there is left in the joints. That's
Yes.
always the question for Trump, is there really any upside left for him? If there is upside for him that's available, then he got it tonight. Now, the other question is, how long will it maintain? Because how many times have we seen this was the moment that Trump became president,
Yeah.
and then 2 minutes later, he's kicking himself in the ass and walking around with an accordion. Like, we just don't know.
And now that image is in my head. Thank you, Ben.
I don't think this moved the ball. I think it helped it put him in a position where he is now in charge of the conversation again, until he tweets some stupid thing. And I don't think it moved. It's going to force anybody to move off the dime on the immigration thing. But I do think, there's always a chance with Trump that people will take another look. The American public want a good president. They want him to do a good job. They want him to be presidential. If he can reconstruct himself a little bit, which I just seriously doubt, he put himself in a position to do that. I don't believe that.
There's a reason incumbents tend to get reelected, and it's that reason.
Yeah.
We are rooting for the guy.
Sure.
And I think tonight was basically a win. I think it was a win of a speech. Does it move the needle? I don't know. We'll see if the government shuts down again in a few weeks. We'll just, that is hard to say. But it at least wasn't a loss. He didn't hurt himself tonight. What more can you ask for?
I think there's one other aspect of it, too, that we haven't talked about, and that is he really did expertly play the women.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he did.
It was well done.
Democrats.
I didn't think they were going to be stupid enough to fall for it, and they just went right for it. I mean, it was amazing. He was like, so, and one more thing that you're going to love.
Yeah.
You're here. And they're like,
Don't sit
it's
down.
like, this is,
If
honestly,
he had just set up confetti cannons,
Yeah.
it was like the sleaziest lounge singer trick that you used. Like, and all the ladies, the beautiful ladies in the audience, all the women here who look under 40, not a day over 40, and it's a bunch of 80-year-old blue hairs.
If
I mean, that's what he
if
was
women
doing.
didn't keep falling for that, the human race would die out.
when Trump looks magnanimous, it really works.
He
for
works
him.
the audience. I mean, that was it.
Yep.
Like his comedy routine tonight really worked. He had
Yeah.
a couple of throwaway lines, and they were his best moments.
Every time he does that, he's great.
The thing where he said they wouldn't, do the happy birthday. They wouldn't sing that for, or to the little girl with cancer. They wouldn't cheer for me that way. Like all of that, great.
Yeah.
All of that's
Yeah.
great.
And I also think that he did a pretty expert job, and I don't know if it was on purpose or if favor just broke in his direction, which is by framing so many of his arguments the way that he did, he got to really show what Nancy Pelosi will stand for and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez won't. In several places, he drew out that distinction, which is potentially
It's a fault line.
a really important fault line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's always the best
Socialism-
part of the State of the Union is always what the opposition will not stand for.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not standing for black employment, who are you? What do you
Yeah.
represent?
And he did show. I mean, that's
You're the party of
definition.
the Ku Klux Klan.
That is the definition of a wedge issue, right? You put a wedge in
That's
between
right.
those, and he nailed it.
I will say the
several times.
one other thing that he did, and it was clever, is that he gave us all the red meat that we wanted, but he had a bunch of policy prescriptions that I don't particularly like, and he just dumped them in there, and we've sort of glossed over that. But if people were listening, and you happen to be, kind of slightly left of center, and you like government spending on infrastructure, and you like tariffs, and you like free family paid leave and all this kind of stuff mandated by the government.
You like actual leaders of drug rings getting
released from prison.
I mean, like all that stuff.
We forgot about that. That was a low moment.
Only Nixon could go to China, guys.
I mean, that's not red meat material for the right wing, and he can get away with that stuff.
That's
So
right.
this is why a lot of folks said if he had started off his presidency by making a couple of moves across the aisle, he would have been a little better off. I still think that Democrats were never going to allow
They
him to
wouldn't
do
let
that,
it.
so.
They wouldn't let
They
him.
couldn't.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, he wakes up tomorrow in a slightly better position than he started off today.
Yep.
And
Until the Mueller report comes out in 2 weeks. So see you then for the Backstage.
Yeah.
tune in for Backstage 2 weeks from now when the Mueller report drops.
Russia
It
collusion.
may not be 2 weeks from now. I guarantee you when it drops, we're going to be doing one of these.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again to our Daily Wire subscribers and everyone who's stuck it out this far. You actually made it through the State of the Union, which is basically, it's your 40th birthday, too. Congratulations. We'll see you guys next time.